Fait appel, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur Le Saint-Ghost,
Présent.
Monsieur Le Saint-Farnham,
Présent.
Madame Saint-Ferguson,
Présente.
Monsieur Le Saint-Lefondre,
Présent.
Madame Saint-Valois,
Present.
Madame Saint-Amour,
Present.
Monsieur Le Saint-Pallet, Monsieur Le Saint-Mezec,
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier,
Présent.
Madame la Connétable de Saint-Laurent,
Présente.
Madame la Connétable de Saint-Sauveur,
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelade,
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville,
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité,
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre, Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie,
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen,
Présent.
Madame la Connétable de Saint-Martin,
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean,
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément,
Présent.
Madame Deputy Martin,
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern,
Présent.
Madame la Deputy de Grouville,
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Lewis,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier, Monsieur le Deputy Higgins, Monsieur le Deputy Massel, Madame la Deputy Pinel,
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Martin,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Ouen,
Présent.
Madame la Deputy Dublé,
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Labbe,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Wickenden,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Sainte-Marie,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Truscott,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Young,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Ash,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Guida,
Présent.
Monsieur le
Présent.
Deputy de Saint-Pierre,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de la Trinité,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Jean, Madame le Deputy de la Hegra,
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Ayer,
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Pershaw, Monsieur le Deputy Ward,
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves,
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin,
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Gardner,
Present.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et que nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussissent au bien et au soulagement du peuple qu'ils de plus de commettre à leur soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père,
Notre Père,
qui es aux
qui es aux
cieux,
cieux,
ton nom
ton
soit
nom
sanctifié, ton
ton
règne
règne
vienne, ta volonté
ta
soit
volonté
faite
soit
sur
faite
la
dans la
terre
terre
comme au ciel.
Donc,
Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonnons nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le Saint-Pallet,
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier,
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Higgins,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Masson,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Jean,
Sir, the Deputy has a medical appointment this morning, but plans to be in the Assembly virtually this afternoon.
We'll mark him excusé over the morning, and when he's present this afternoon, then mark him as present.
Madame la Deputy Pêcheur.
Mallard.
Je jure que Madame la Deputy Pêcheur est tellement disposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux tâches en exposé sa santé.
Deputy Guida, you will have note for the roll call that you were recorded as present. Les états sont constitués. On behalf of members, I'd like to welcome His Excellency to the sitting and his presence in the chamber this morning. Now, we move on to matters relating to the government plan. The first item of business is a statement to be made by the Chief Minister on the government plan, after which, as members will know, there is an opportunity for 15 minutes of questions. Chief Minister. Yes, I think we use the mic.
Yes.
You use the mic. You do.
Before the Chief Minister starts, has the statement been circulated?
Yeah,
I
it's in
can't
the
see it in
chat.
chat.
It's in the chat.
It's in the chat, right. Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to attempt to do this standing up if I can, and we'll see how it works. So today, members will begin debating the third and final government plan of this Assembly. Before the Treasury Minister opens that debate, I want to take this opportunity to underline the significance of this plan and also provide members with a chance to pose questions to me directly as Chief Minister. So just on the basis before I actually go through the actual statement, can I make sure people can hear me properly, particularly online?
Could anyone indicate that they can't hear the Chief Minister? He's very clear in the Assembly, of course, but if people indicate virtually if there's any difficulty?
Shouldn't be a problem.
No indication, so please continue, Chief Minister.
This government plan addresses the significant impact COVID has had and continues to have on our island. It proposes funding for our continued pandemic response, as well as significant investment into our recovery. This plan also outlines spending on the priorities identified by this Assembly, including new investment proposed in each of our common strategic policy priorities. It includes the consolidating of long-term improvements to our public sector, which will ensure more effective public services for islanders, utilising improved digital and physical infrastructure. Ultimately, sir, this plan invests in Jersey's future, funding the long-term projects our island needs and delivering the future islanders deserve. This month marks 2 years since the world's first cases of COVID-19 were reported. In those 24 months, the entire globe has had to meet the challenges posed by the most serious public health threat in generations, along with all the pandemic's implications on our mental health, education, supply chains, and economy. Every aspect of island life has been affected to some degree, and every islander has had a part to play in our response. I am proud of the collective effort our island has marshalled to this pandemic, and I want to take this opportunity to once again thank all islanders for their diligence and for the determination they have shown. Together, we have undertaken one of the most effective vaccination rollouts in Europe. We have safely kept schools open more successfully than anywhere else in the British Isles. And we have mobilised a package of financial support that is unprecedented in our island's history. This government plan provides funding not only for our ongoing response to COVID, such as our Test and Trace programme, PPE supply and the COVID helpline, but also significant investment into Jersey's recovery. We have earmarked £5 million in spending next year on projects supporting our health and social recovery. This will include investment to close attainment gaps in education caused by COVID-19 disruption, funding to build on the success of the Connect Me initiative during the pandemic, and support for those who are experiencing long COVID. We will be providing a separate £13.4 million over the next 4 years into our Children's Health Recovery Plan which will see investment into a new neurodevelopmental and integrated therapy service for young people and their families, a dedicated CAMHS home treatment team, and increased access to support for young people impacted by COVID. As well as our recovery, this plan includes significant spending to advance our shared priorities agreed in the CSP. Building on our efforts to put children first, which in the past has included a 1.7 million corporate parenting package, a new intensive fostering service, and our actions to become the first jurisdiction in the British Isles to ban the smacking of children. This plan will see around £200 million worth of spending towards putting children first next year. When we took office in 2018, gross expenditure for education stood at 5.8 million. In 2022, this plan will see that figure increase to around £25 million. The total growth for putting children first, already agreed by this Assembly, is around £35 million a year for each of the next 4 years. This plan includes brand new initiatives which will see new resources to address the increasing demographic pressures anticipated within education, and investment in the new targeted youth support service, as well as support for the implementation of a new model of community-focused support by CAMHS. We will be continuing to invest and investing more into the physical and mental well-being of islanders, whilst continuing to manage the impact of COVID on our health service. This government has overseen a substantial increase in the funding for and focus on mental health, including the opening of the Listening Lounge and new mental health law. Last year's government plan approved almost £28 million in new funding towards mental health over the next 4 years, and this plan will add a 13.4 million on top of that figure. We will work with our partners in the health and care sector to implement the Jersey Care model, which will expand primary and community care services for a more accessible and patient-focused model of healthcare. This model will also meet the needs of our island's ageing population, assisting those with long-term conditions live independently and receive the care they need. Additionally, further funding will be provided to reduce waiting times and improve the support available to patients. Having worked to safeguard livelihoods and support local businesses during the pandemic, this plan offers an opportunity to revitalise our local economy. We will address the long-term challenges and seize the historic opportunities before us, with the delivery of the island's first economic framework, providing a common vision for Jersey's future economy. This government plan will also build on our previous commitment to ensure 1% of spending goes to heritage, arts and culture, and our efforts to diversify our economy continue through the encouragement of, amongst others, the medicinal cannabis and digital sectors. We are expanding on the work already underway to raise the minimum wage and separately to identify new sites available for housing. The implementation of the new £10 million affordable purchase product before the end of this term will help more islanders to own their own homes, and we are also freezing Andean rents for 2022. Over the course of this government plan, the Climate Emergency Fund will deploy some £23 million to support the switch to lower carbon transport and more energy efficient heating. Next year, we will be increasing fuel duty by 3p per litre to support this fund and further incentivise fuel efficient and hybrid vehicles. So this year's government plan will also consolidate the progress we have made over the last 3 years to improve our public sector, delivering long-term benefits to islanders. This plan includes a further £20 million of rebalancing, reducing waste and increasing efficiency within the government to deliver a more productive and more cost-effective public service for islanders. It builds on the progress we've made to improve the government's infrastructure, both in the physical realm with the new office strategy and digitally via the ITS programme. The former promised to deliver significant and sustained savings to the public purse and to free up sites for housing in St Helier, all whilst providing a more convenient single point of contact for islanders engaging with the government. The latter will assist in modernising the government's internal workings, the benefits of which have already been made apparent during the COVID pandemic as we made the switch to home working and quickly developed systems to manage PPE supply. So these changes and the further funding outlined in this government plan will ensure that whatever the makeup of the Council of Ministers following next year's election, the government of the day will inherit an agile, modern, efficient and cost-effective public service. This plan also advances projects to protect our island's unique heritage, including resources, the Island Identity Project, and as I've said, the 1% commitment to arts and heritage spending agreed in last year's plan. We will continue to increase our overseas aid contributions and advance our Global Markets Programme as part of our efforts to enhance our island's relationships with key global partners and to seize emerging opportunities. We have proposed investing £20 million into the establishment of a dedicated technology fund, which, as page 175 of the current plan notes, will be the subject of a future States proposition. If approved, this fund will be used to support our emerging digital economy, close gaps in our innovation ecosystem, and support new high-value initiatives to create digital jobs in Jersey. This plan also provides funding to advance a number of important capital projects for our island. This will include Fort Regent, completion of the new sewage treatment works, maintenance to Elizabeth Castle, and the combined ambulance, fire and rescue headquarters, which we have proposed be named to honour our late colleague, Glenn Norman. We will also be providing significant funding as part of our School Estates projects to expand and modernise our schools to support our education staff in delivering the best educational outcomes for all students. This funding forms part of £106 million in capital funding to put children first over the course of this plan, coupled with the revenue growth of just under £150 million in total additional growth earmarked towards the CSP. This plan is putting children first. Alongside the investments we are making in our CSP priority areas and in the modernisation of government, this plan also emphasises sustainable public finances. Despite the global economic uncertainty caused by COVID, we've outlined plans to borrow responsibly to cover our pandemic response, the new hospital, and the refinancing of our pension debt. Now, the hospital debt, which has been agreed by this Assembly, is entirely new. The COVID debt was unavoidable, and the measures this Assembly has already approved will more than repay that debt by at least £80 million. The pre-87 liabilities have existed for a long time. Whatever happens in this debate, they are on our balance sheet now. By taking advantage of historically low interest rates, we can refinance those existing public sector pension liabilities early, saving the taxpayer £3.6 billion over the long term. This plan is therefore able to chart a course to return to balanced budgets without relying on raising taxes, delaying important projects, or jeopardising our financial reserves. So, before I close to take questions from members, I want to thank all those who have contributed to this year's government plan. Officers have worked incredibly hard to develop this plan in line with the Council of Ministers' ambitions for Jersey. I want to thank scrutiny panels and States members for their engagement and consideration of our proposals and for their amendments. Now, members will understand that for a variety of reasons, we cannot accept all amendments, but I hope they will appreciate that we have, where possible, engaged with them and suggested small alterations to their original proposals. As we outlined at the members' briefing last week, of the 26 amendments that have been lodged, we are accepting, or with the agreement of the proposer, amending and accepting 13 amendments. This plan has been prepared by the government, but it has been informed through the wishes of the Assembly and the needs of our island. It builds on the successes we've had since 2018. To date, we have weathered the unprecedented challenges of both Brexit and COVID, the likes of which have not been faced by this island for generations. We have seen significant investment into each of our CSP priority areas, and we've improved the culture, organisation and infrastructure of our public service, ensuring it is able to effectively deliver for the future needs of islanders. We have done all of this while seeing a total increase of over £550 million in our island's reserves. We have borrowed for one-off purposes to cover our essential new hospital project, our response to the pandemic, and to refinance our existing pre-87 pension liabilities. And from 2023, we have balanced the books. We have plans in place to repay all island debt in a prudent and pragmatic manner. That concludes my statement, sir, and I look forward to taking members' questions.
Thank you very much, Chief Minister. There's now a period of 15 minutes for questions, and the first to ask a question is Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. In the Chief Minister's statement, there was no use of the words improve the standard of living or reduce income inequality, despite that having been a priority signed up unanimously by this Assembly during the CSP debate. Can we take that as yet a further sign that the government's commitment to create a more equal society over this term of office lies in tatters?
Chief Minister.
Short answer, sir, is no. And if the Centre had actually read the appendices and Appendix 4, sir, and you will see the growth that has been put into that area in the government plan, sir. Thank you.
So the Chief Minister wasn't listening to my question. I was referring to the content of the statement, which we are now questioning him on, which did not contain those words. So I'd give him an opportunity, if he is so able to, because if this existed, it would surely be in the other document he has just quoted. Can he provide us with any statistical evidence that demonstrates that when it comes to incomes and standards of living, that Jersey is now a more equal society because of the work of previous government plans, and will be even more of an equal society because of the work of this government plan? Or is it in fact the case that no such statistical evidence exists?
Oh, that's actually a different question to the one the Senator originally stated. If we were to put everything into the government plans, into the statement that related to what we've done in the government plan, I think I'd still be talking. In fact, we'd be talking for most of the morning. There are quite significant sums that have been identified in the government plan in relation to improving inequality, sir. And I've answered a number of questions to the Senator on that front. It is a shame he appears to have forgotten the answers on that. What I can say, sir, in terms of statistical evidence, he will be fully aware that of my frustration, sir, that because of COVID, the report that we had hoped to produce, I gave a commitment to, we put the funding in place on, and it started work in 2019, but was fundamentally disrupted by COVID. And so we are restarting that with part of the funding that's in this in this government plan. But, sir, as a starting point, if we turn around and look at the Social Security Minister, who has put measures in place which will assist about 10 to 12,000 islanders in accessing GPs more cheaply, that is a very tangible result, and there will be others as well, which we have alluded to on a number of occasions in this Assembly.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. The Chief Minister states that this government will leave behind sustainable public finances. Yet the Treasury Minister has suggested that the next government will have no option but to increase taxes. Why has the Chief Minister and his government not taken, left the island with such a legacy?
Sir, the analogy I have used, and a number, actually I won't use that analogy, sir, it is very clear, sir, that when we came in, there was a significant underinvestment in a whole variety of areas, whether it was mental health, whether it was our culture as in the organizational culture, whether it was in our IT systems. In fact, I recall the Senator criticising us, I think in 2019, for the investment we were putting into IT. And so the fact that this sitting is taking place as a hybrid, but particularly for the majority members using Office 365, is directly as a result of the investment we put in. She, as a previous minister, sir, failed to do that investment. It has been a generational side of failure to invest in a whole variety of crucial systems, which has left our island exposed in ways that I really do not want to say in public. We have taken the really quite difficult decisions to resolve those matters. So from that perspective, sir, the organisation from where we've started is in a far better place. It has further to go. In terms of sustainable finances, sir, on the basis that, as I've said, we have had an unprecedented, generationally unprecedented challenge for which the Senator has only criticised us from day one. It would be nice to hear something positive from her once. But, sir, the unprecedented financial challenge that we have had, whereby we have spent, I think, something like £400 million in protecting islanders' lives and livelihoods. We've only had to borrow, sir, we only proposed to borrow a maximum of £200 million, and that will be repaid, and over that there will be more money coming in. And then, sir, in 2023,
that's
we'll be in
already
service.
reached the 2 bits, which is well over what is normally permitted. Supplemental question?
Sir, given the tenor of the response from the Chief Minister, which is disappointing at the outset of what is to be a
Well,
very
this
long
does-
week, I shall not provide supplement.
Very well. Deputy Morell?
Thank you, sir. The islands, or a large part of the island's economic future, will depend on a strong skills base. I understand the Chief Minister can't express everything that's in the government plan in a statement, but skills weren't mentioned. Would the Chief Minister please provide the Assembly with a précis of how this government plan will improve skills among the working population for islanders?
Chief Minister.
So I don't have the direct numbers immediately to hand. I know where to find them. There is a further investment into skills, sir, for exactly the reason that the Deputy is alluding to, sir. So skills are high in the priorities, and there is direct investment, some of which has already been embedded in the plan by previous approvals of this Assembly, i.e. which is treated as growth, sir, in the forthcoming years. So there is investment or further investment into skills, because as the Deputy is saying, it is a critical area.
Supplemental, Deputy?
Yes, please, sir. Unfortunately, I'm hearing that certain programs and skills are being downgraded in terms of the funding they're receiving. Would the Minister please assure me and the Assembly that skills will be properly funded and properly staffed as well, sir?
Sir, just to note that the growth already agreed in the plan is around 700,000, 695, 716 onwards, £1,000 for each year. So on that basis, that is growth, sir. I would have thought that would have meant that skills were being properly funded. From memory, sir, there are other elements as well, sir, under the COVID recovery schemes, where we again are focusing on improving skills, sir. So perhaps the Deputy can send me the details to cover his concerns, but certainly from our perspective, skills remains a significant focus going forward, particularly because that's got to assist with growing our own, with increasing productivity on the island and all those type of things.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. May I ask the Chief Minister, one of the more public comments made on the current government plan was by a Board of Governors that identified a £23 million funding deficit in schools. Does he accept that figure? And if not, why not? Thank you, sir.
Sorry, sir, I'm trying to find the reference point I need to quote from. The short answer is, sir, without any further detail, no, I do not accept that figure. Again, sir, I'm disappointed this does not seem to have come out. As I said in the statement, I think the growth over the next 4 years is something like £150 million in revenue. If I look specifically in the government plan in Appendix 4, sir, improving educational outcomes total, growth already approved by this Assembly. That's growth that's been approved in the previous two government plans. So it is under this government, is £21 million for 2022, just under £21 million in 23, just over £21 million in 2024, and the same in 2025. So I do not understand how, with those numbers, that the stakeholders that the deputy is referring to can come up with these suggestions they have done. I'm very happy to try and understand that, sir, but my understanding is part of it has been around a very early consultation exercise with probably, it feels like, imprecise figures. But the facts, sir, and that's the items that have been approved, as opposed to the relatively lower additional growth that's approved, being sought for approval this year, sir.
Supplemental, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Just to confirm then that the Chief Minister does not accept £23 million deficit as detailed by the Board of Governors?
No, I don't. I'd like to see the breakdown and how they've come to that conclusion, sir.
There's a few minutes left. Does any other member have any questions of the Chief Minister on his statement? Senator Balwa.
Yes, thank you, sir. I'd like to ask the Chief Minister, and I thank the Council of Ministers for accepting my amendment. I'd like to ask the Chief Minister, all the numbers that he was referring to in terms of growth, how does he expect to see the changes in performance under the performance framework as a result of this government plan?
So the performance framework, as the Senator I'm sure knows, has a variety of indicators that are produced and updated by, in essence, the Statistics Department and under the Chief Statistician, and they also then feed down to further key components, which are also updated. They are updated on a periodic basis. Some are quarterly, some are annually, and as I said, the frequency will depend on the indicator. And the Chief Statistician has accepted the fact, sir, that there was a lag in getting them updated for this year. I understand since that was commented in the hearing that we were in, significant progress has been made in improving that position. So, sir, my expectation, that's the whole point of the performance framework, is that those indicators that will capture what we put in will over time hopefully show an improvement. We've always said when it came in, because it came in literally effectively pre-COVID, sir, that it will take some time to show that kind of improvement, but the theory should be for the next Council of Ministers, plural, that as the system beds down, it will identify key areas where actually further work needs to be done. That's the whole point of it, sir.
Supplemental question, Senator?
Yes, thank you, sir. Can I ask the Chief Minister, in terms of the indicators and the way that it's worked so far, bearing in mind we have had COVID, whether there are any particular indicators that he would look to change, considering this is the last government plan?
At this stage, sir, because of COVID, I would prefer to let the system have a year of, shall we say, stability, i.e. let's get out of COVID, let's bed it down, and then, so essentially, sir, I would expect the next Council of Ministers to probably perform a review, maybe mid-term, to suggest are there any improvements that need to be made. But basically, so I think the system is fairly innovative, sir. In fact, from memory, and the Senator hopefully he's got a better memory on these things than me. From memory, it was actually held up and presented at certain international fora, and it was praised at the time for being very much of a very global high quality. It does tie through those, if you like, performance indicators into that thread that goes from the CSP into the government plan, into the mid-year review and downwards. And so there should be a common thread, which is, again, unique in terms of its new under this Council of Ministers, which can then, in theory, tie the actions of this government and of this Assembly directly into how they improve lives for islanders.
Very much. There are two persons who have indicated a desire to ask questions, and we're now almost out of time. Senator Mezek, you wish to propose an extension of 15 minutes?
Yes, please, sir.
That's a permitted proposition within the context. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member have anything to say about that? I'll assume not. Does any member, I'll take this on a standing vote unless someone indicates they wish to have a vote placed in the chat. So anyone who wishes to register a contrary vote or wishes the vote placed in the chat, could they indicate now, please? Otherwise, I'll take it as an agreement by standing or by standing vote. Deputy St. Peter's asked for a vote. Very well. I'll ask the greffier to place a link within the chat. The vote is on extending the question period by 15 minutes. Only one such extension is possible. I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Proposition is adopted. 27 votes pour, no votes, 6 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 4 votes pour and 3 votes contre in the chat. Accordingly, the time is extended by 15 minutes from now. The next to ask a question is.
So sorry, can I have the can we have the contra, please?
Very well.
The members who voted contra were the Deputy of St. Peter, Deputy Guida, Constable St. Juan, Deputy Lewis, the Deputy of Trinity, Deputy Labby, and in the chat, the Constable of St. Saviour and Deputy Pinnell.
Very well. Next to ask questions is the Constable St. John.
Thank you, sir. And can I thank the Chief Minister both for his statement and for the helpful briefing we had last week. Would the Chief Minister agree with me that the island needs this week's debate, like all debates, to be constructive and that all views should be aired and treated with respect? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any supplemental on that one?
No, thank you.
Right. Deputy Morell, you wish to ask a second question? There's no one else indicating a wish to ask at this point.
Thank you, sir. As the island transitions to try and reduce its carbon emissions and become more environmentally friendly island in general, would the Chief Minister please provide a précis of how this government plan will help stimulate the green economy? Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister.
So in terms of stimulating the green economy, there are three sides to that, sir. There are initiatives happening within the financial services and JFL, which is about the global side of, want a better expression, green-backed investment. Within the locally, sir, within the economic framework that the Minister is bringing forward, I would expect there to be, and I'm not cited in those areas, to be green initiatives in there, sir. And finally, sir, within, as I've understood, sir, from the environmental side and also within the some of the areas that the Minister of Economic Development is also proposing in terms of the maritime resources. My understanding is that there's quite a lot around that would support, I don't have enough knowledge about it, the blue carbon side of things, sir.
Much indeed. Supplemental question, Deputy Morrell?
Thank you, sir. Would, in the Chief Minister's view, is the technology fund that is proposed within the government plan one channel through which funding could be provided to environmentally minded startups or businesses that will help the island meet some of its environmental goals?
So the purpose, I thank the Deputy for the question. We've been quite clear that the terms of reference, if you like, of the Technology Fund very much have to come back to this Assembly and are under development. And I bear in mind the Deputy's position as an Assistant Minister of Economic Development. His input would be very much welcomed in how those terms of reference continue to take shape. There has been reference to whether it should reflect, for example, green technology. I certainly saw that in an early draft. At this stage, my initial view was very much focusing on, when I say technology and the digital sector, but that doesn't preclude technology and digital sector side that would have a environmental or a benefit, therefore would be captured by that side. Whether it's not particularly intended to look like an innovation fund, I hasten to add, but whether it could assist. The idea is it helps, it's an investment into this part of the economy to diversify the economy and therefore not only improve productivity, to assist us in our population challenges, but also, again, to give alternatives to youngsters on island from their future career prospects. So in all of that kind of objective, and I'm sure we'll hear more of that later, sir, Jersey has a global edge, which will probably last about 6 years. If we don't invest in that sector, it will potentially risk just withering. But within all that side, sir, as I said, if the Deputy has specific amendments on those terms of reference, which are, as I understand it, in draft being produced by SB3, then his input would be very welcome, sir.
Much. Just to let members know that some are asking for second questions, I'm obviously prioritising those who have not yet asked a question. Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. Also, I'd like to echo the words of the Constable St John, and on that, thank the Chief Minister for the briefing last Friday and ask the question I asked him then about where are we now with the COVID-19 response, pots of money, to use a turn of phrase, and what is his concerns with the rising inflation that keeps being reported, not just across the United Kingdom, but Europe and around the world.
Chief Minister.
Sorry, sir, and perhaps this can be injury time. Could the Deputy just repeat his question? I lost the very end of it, and I didn't know if he meant inflation in terms of increasing COVID numbers or inflation as in the economic indicator.
Yes, Deputy, I'm afraid I didn't catch the last part of the question either, so perhaps you could repeat that.
Yes, no problem. The first question was about the COVID funds and what is available and flexibility, similar to my previous question on that. And his response was to the economic effects of inflation, not the inflation of COVID numbers. Thank you.
So to date, certainly the last update I had on inflation was that it was expected to be short term and that things would then revert back to more usual levels, or the usual lowest levels we've had. I've not had a more recent update on that. In terms of, sir, apologies, sir, the first part I think was, is there provision in the government plan for future impacts of COVID? The short answer is yes, and they are found in at least 2 areas, part of which is under general reserves and the COVID recovery amount, sir.
Well, supplemental question, Deputy Pamplin?
No, that's fine. Thank you, sir.
Senator Mezey. Oh, I beg your, yes, Senator Mezey.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask the Chief Minister if the spending and income that's forecast over this period of the government plan is based on current population growth projections, And is there a risk of those becoming out of date if P116 is adopted?
So in terms of short answer, I don't know the full answer to that. So my understanding is that that would be very much a detailed question for Treasury, which hopefully the Treasury Minister can pick up at some point in her opening speech or in her closing speeches. My understanding, sir, is that in essence, it will look at working population. And obviously one of the issues around the population figures is the ratio of under 16s and retired is the significant area. And so I don't have the projected figures going forward, but it will also be factors of projected growth, general RPI, state of the economy and things like that, which tends to be, I believe, a greater weighting.
Supplemental question, Ms. Senator?
Thank you, sir. I confess that I was being facetious with that previous question. And in actual fact, what I'm asking the Chief Minister is that isn't it the case that actually the projections are safe because P116 will make no difference whatsoever?
I would not agree with that in any shape or form. So what I will say, sir, is that, and it is something that one will have to look at 10, 15 years away, is as technology improves, you will potentially have to look at different ways we raise revenue as if we maintain productivity, but also a stable population. But that is not something for now. It is not something for 5 years' time. It might not be something for 20 years' time, but there will come a point when one will have to look at those revenue structures and how we operate, not in the near term in any shape or form. And always, Jersey will maintain a stable and competitive tax base, sir.
Conor Taylor.
Thank you, sir. In his statement, the Chief Minister alluded to the quite extraordinary success that the island has had in dealing with the pandemic. But due to the perhaps prevailingly negative tone of the questions that have followed the statement, that perhaps has been lost. Would the Chief Minister join me in thanking and complimenting and congratulating the hundreds or thousands of staff and volunteers who have been part of Jersey's response to the pandemic and who even today are administering much needed booster jabs to our population to keep them safe from the next wave? And would he agree with me that our public sector workers, particularly in medical science and treatment, who've been at the forefront of our response to the pandemic, deserve our praise and thanks?
Chief Minister?
So I have absolutely no hesitation in agreeing wholeheartedly with all of the sentiments of the CONOTAB on this matter, and particularly, sir, I think I did say in some of my statement, I'm proud of where we've landed, and I'm proud to lead the team, if ultimately to have led the teams that we lead. Obviously, it goes down politically into the senior levels of the public sector, and then further down into the operational side. Absolutely, sir, we should be very proud of everybody who's contributed to the COVID pandemic, our response to date to the COVID pandemic. And we know we have further challenges to come, but this island is in, to date, a very good place. And it is because of all the actions of everyone who has brought us to this point, sir. And I thank the CONOTAB for his question.
Is there a supplementary there, CONOTAB?
No, thank you, sir.
Very well. Senator Pallett.
Thank you, sir. One of this government's key priorities has been improving islanders' well-being and mental and physical health. I'll just ask the Chief Minister whether he believes there's enough ambition and investment in the island sports facilities within this government plan.
So I don't have the figures directly to hand as to the amount of investment that's going into sports, but there are some reasonably sizable sums. And as the Senator will be aware, we did release the sports strategy, and indeed under the fiscal stimulus we have funded certain new sports facilities. We do have to recognise there is more to do, but there is a fair degree of funding that is going to sports, during the course of this government plan as a starting point.
Supplemental question, Senator? Supplemental question, Senator?
Sorry. No, sir. No.
Thank you very much indeed. Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. When the Chief Minister was chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, he often berated previous ministers for not saving enough in terms of public expenditure. The economic advisor to this Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel states in his report that whether a public authority should engage in a form of financial engineering as ambitious as the plan's proposal merits rigorous scrutiny. Moreover, the precise steps and risk involved in the proposed financial strategy should be fully exposed and exemplified in a manner that is lucid to the satisfaction of elected members and the public body involved. He continues to say the proposal should be further clarified and reviewed. Would the Chief Minister agree?
I certainly agree, sir, that I felt in the past not enough was being done, as a result of my, in relation to making the public sector more efficient. And certainly one prime example, sir, I had was the fact that trying to get the consolidated offer strategy has taken 10 to 11 years. And actually, when we came in, we started it, and it is now being delivered. Demolition has started on an agreed site. And so just to mark that down, we have achieved just under £60 million recurring savings. We have plans for a further 20 million. Those are identified in this government plan. And if the Assembly approves this plan, we will be saving in total somewhere between 3.4 and 3.6 billion pounds. And therefore, sir, I very much stand by my view that we were not doing enough in terms of producing a more efficient organisation. There is more to do, there is no question. There will be more challenges ahead. And equally, sir, at the same time, I stand by what has been an eye-opener revelation, is the consequence of the lack of investment in other areas, which firstly have inhibited things like productivity and performance management, and all those type of areas have inhibited and frankly brought down the culture of the organisation. And that's an organisation of which actually we should be very proud, but it needs to be fit for purpose for the modern times, sir.
Very much. That brings the time allocated for questions to the Chief Minister as extended to an end. We now move to deal with the first item of public business, which is the proposed government plan. Now, as members will have noted yesterday, circulated later in the afternoon, was a note to all members indicating that the government is accepting a significant number of amendments, including amendments to amendments. It is possible that we read, therefore, the proposition as amended by all of those amendments, if members agree. But just to remind members, the amendments accepted by into the government plan by ministers are amendments 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 as amended, 13 as amended, 14, 15 as amended, 19 as amended, 23 as amended, and 26 as amended. It is understood that those who have brought those amendments have agreed that the proposition may be read incorporating them, but I wished to give members the opportunity to say that they did not agree, if they wished not to agree, for the main proposition to be read as amended with regard to all or indeed any of the amendments that I have just read out. It's a matter for members. We can proceed, as I say, to present a consolidated proposition incorporating all of these amendments, or we can take things separately. And I just want to give members the opportunity to indicate a dissent with regard to any of those amendments being incorporated in the proposition. It is understood by the Council of Ministers, as I understand it, that everything that I've read out has been agreed as being incorporated. But if members would like to indicate either in the Assembly or in the chat that they do not agree, otherwise I'll ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended. Very well. No one's indicated any difficulty with that. I hope I didn't make the explanation too convoluted. Unfortunately, the word amendment and member sounds rather too close, and it could have got somewhat confusing along the way. But I will ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended by all of the amendments that I have set out. Greffier.
States are asked to decide whether they have opinion to receive the Government Plan 2022-2025 specified in Article 9.1 of the Public Finances Jersey Law 2019, the law, and specifically A, to approve the estimates of total state's income to be paid into the Consolidated Fund in 2022 as set out in Appendix 2, Summary Table 1 to the report, which is inclusive of the proposed taxation and import duties changes outlined in the Government Plan, in line with Article 9.2a of the law, except that in Summary Table 1, State's income, the return from Andium Homes and Housing Trust shall be reduced by £2,750,000 in 2022 to allow for a social housing rents policy whereby rents are frozen for 2022 and capped at 80% of the market rate from 2022 onwards, and that government shall continue to work with Andium to finalise a solution to minimise the impact on both Andium and the Consolidated Fund. B, to approve the changes to approval for finance and borrowing for 2022 as shown in Appendix 2, Summary Table 3 to the report, which may be obtained by the Minister for Treasury and Resources, as and when required, in line with Article 9.2c of the law, of up to those revised approvals, except that in Summary Table 3, for the row entitled Fiscal Stimulus, including refinancing, in the column headed Change to Approval, there shall be inserted the figure minus 20,359, and in each of the columns headed 2022, 2023, 2024 and 2025, the figure 50,000 should be replaced with 29,641. C, to approve the transfers from one state's fund to another for 2022 up to and including the amount set out in Appendix 2, Summary Table 2 to the report, noting that the transfer from the Consolidated Fund to the Technology Fund is subject to the Assembly's approval of a proposition to create such a fund in 2022 in line with Article 9.2b of the law. D, to approve each major project that is to be started or continued in 2022 and the total cost of each such project, and any amendment to the proposed total cost for major projects under a previously approved government plan in line with Article 9.2d, E and F of the law, and as set out in Appendix 2, Summary Table 4 to the report. E, to endorse the efficiencies and other rebalancing measures for 2022 contained in the government plan as set out in Appendix 2, Summary Table 6, with amendments made as appropriate to reflect the establishment of the Ministry of External Relations as provided for in F and reflected within each gross head of expenditure in Appendix 2, Summary Table 5.1. F, to approve the proposed amount to be appropriated from the Consolidated Fund for 2022 for each head of expenditure being gross expenditure less estimated income, if any, in line with Articles 9.2g, 10.1 and 10.2 of the law, and set out in Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5.1 and 2 of the report, except that in Summary Table 5.1, 2022 Revenue Heads of Expenditure, the head of expenditure for customer and local services shall be decreased by £1,849,000 to allow for a reduction in expenditure arising from a social housing rent policy, whereby rents are frozen for 2022 and capped at 80% of the market rate from 2022 onwards, and that the head of expenditure for COVID-19 response be reduced by £901,000 to meet the net impact of the rent freeze. £772,650 should be transferred from the General Reserve Head of Expenditure to the Infrastructure, Housing and Environment Head of Expenditure to reinstate the original business case funding request for regulatory sustainability. The Head of Expenditure for Children, Young People, Education and Skills should be increased by £53,266 to allow the Youth Service to ensure the retention of a full-time assistant youth worker to support the inclusion project. And the Head of Expenditure for Children, Young People, Education and Skills for 2022 should be increased by £27,000 to allow the Youth Service to employ an additional part-time assistant youth worker to support a 2-year pilot transition programme within the inclusion project. The head of expenditure for children, young people, education and skills shall be increased by £30,000 to allow for additional resources to reinstate the Jersey Childcare Trust full grant for 2022. The general reserve head of expenditure shall be decreased by £500,000, with the head of expenditure for health and community services increased by the same amount in order to increase the 2022 allocation for mental health. The head of expenditure for central planning reserve shall include, as part of the existing allocation, by £100,000 to allow for a feasibility study of appropriate sites, including PK House for States Members Office space. £200,000 should be transferred from the General Reserve Head of Expenditure to the Head of Expenditure for Strategic Policy Planning and Performance to facilitate and support the creation of a task force in relation to improving women's safety, such body to collect views from islanders and to develop and propose direct and achievable action points to achieve that objective to the new government for inclusion in the next government plan. An additional role should be inserted under departments with the name Ministry of External Relations, and with 145 inserted under the column for income, 2,918 inserted into the column for expenditure allocation, and 2,918 inserted in the column for head of expenditure, with the figures for the Office of the Chief Executive, within which External Relations is currently based, being adjusted down accordingly so that the formal establishment of the Ministry of External Relations in this government plan is cost neutral. The head of expenditure for children, young people, education and skills should be increased by £330,000, and the head of expenditure for the COVID-19 response shall be reduced by £330,000 in order for funding identified to support early years within the COVID Health and Social Recovery Project to be placed within the base departmental budget for children, young people, education and skills. The head of expenditure for central planning reserve shall include £150,000 as part of the existing allocation for First Tower playing field. G, to approve up to £480 million to be appropriated from the Consolidated Fund for the past service pension liabilities refinancing head of expenditure, subject to the availability of funding, which may include in full or in part use of the borrowing financed and referred to in paragraph B. H, to approve the estimated income being estimated gross income less expenditure that each state's trading operation will pay into its trading fund in 2022 in line with Article 928 of the law and set out in Appendix 2, Summary Table 7 to the report. I, to approve the proposed amount to be appropriated from each state's trading operations trading fund for 2022 for each head of expenditure in line with Article 921 of the law, 921 of the law, and set out in Appendix 2, Summary Table 8 to the report. J, to approve the estimated income and expenditure proposals for the Climate Emergency Fund for 2022 as set out in Appendix 2, Summary Table 9 to the report, except that the proposed expenditure within the Climate Emergency Fund shall include an amount of up to £250,000 to fund and implement an air quality monitoring policy to include provision of all necessary equipment. K, to approve an amendment to the policy of the Strategic Reserve Fund to enable that fund to be used as a holding fund for any or all monies related to the repayment of debt raised through external financing, with the monies used to offset the repayment of debt as and when required. And to approve, in accordance with Article 9.1 of the law, the Government Plan 2022-2025 as set out in Appendix 3 to the report, with amendments made as appropriate, including in R150/2021 to reflect the establishment of the Ministry of External Relations as provided for in F, and except that on page 139 of Appendix 3, after the words "a freeze in the rent levels," there should be inserted the words "based on a policy that social housing rent should be capped at 80% of the market rate," in addition to any further changes to Appendix 3 identified as required by the Council of Ministers to reflect the implementation of such a policy. On page 168 under Health Insurance Fund, the following words be inserted. The following safeguards and transparency measures will be put in place in relation to the establishment of the Jersey Care Model. The Independent Non-Executive Board, establishment of which was approved in P114/2020, will be supported to publish a review of the Tranche 1 and the use of 2021 funding by the end of March 2022 at the very latest. And the Digital Health Team within Modernisation and Digital establishes a protected, separately resourced sub-team that includes a manager-grade role to focus solely on the delivery of the Jersey Care Model digital systems and the digital care strategy. Regular updates on these work streams should be regularly reported on to the JCM Programme Board, the Independent Oversight Board, and the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel. The following safeguards and transparency measures will be put in place in relation to the operation of and any transfers made out of the Health Insurance Fund. The Minister for Health and Social Services will annually publish a report which will also be presented in advance to the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel to detail the information provided to the Minister for Social Security relating to the costs incurred on the Jersey Care Model that require a transfer of funds from the HIF. The Minister for Social Security will publish a report within 2 weeks of any transfer to detail how any funds transferred out of the HIF for the purposes of the JCM or its related digital strategies costs have been verified. An actuarial review of the Health Insurance Fund is prioritised in 2022 and will include specific analysis of the use of the HIF for the purposes of the Jersey Care Model and its related digital strategies, consideration of the impact of all withdrawals on the fund since 2020, and the future of the HIF should withdrawals take place as per envisaged by P130/2020. As part of the wider review of sustainable healthcare funding to be undertaken in 2022, there will be a specific consideration to repaying the HIF from the Consolidated Fund for funding withdrawn for the establishment of the Jersey Care Model and its related digital strategies if no sustainable healthcare funding is operational by 2025.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm speaking from the State's Chambers today, and as the Minister for Treasury and Resources, I'm going to present to you the financial part of the government plan. While we are still feeling the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic as individuals, within our community and as a government, we are focusing on recovery and renewal for islanders and our economy by outlining a plan for the long-term sustainability of government finances. This plan, which, as well as covering areas for investment, also looks at how we can use our balance sheet to secure the future financial sustainability of the islands, including the borrowing we'll need to fund our hospital and the costs of the pandemic. It also takes action to save taxpayers' money on the repayment of our existing pension liabilities and addresses legacy issues inherited by this government. First, I will turn to the economic outlook. COVID-19 continued to disrupt the global economy throughout 2021. The outlook has improved in advanced economies due to the widespread success of vaccination programs, which includes our own one here in Jersey. Our closest partner, the UK, saw one of the largest falls in output among developed nations, but has been recovering strongly this year. Our local economy has also taken a hit from the pandemic with an unprecedented 8.7% fall in GVA in 2020. Despite this, the outlook is positive. The headline indicator from the Business Tendency Survey turned positive in June this year, for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. The number of businesses employing staff in Jersey has reached record levels, surpassing the pre-pandemic number. Survey results have continued to reflect increasing business sentiment during the final stages of the reconnection roadmap. The co-funded payroll scheme has been successful in preventing widespread job losses. Following recommendations to gradually unwind support as the economy recovers, the scheme has now closed. We continue to support businesses facing lingering challenges from the pandemic through a variety of targeted schemes. The payroll scheme will be reintroduced if there is a need for public health restrictions to return in the future. As a result of government's rapid response and support, together with the understanding and responsibility accepted by employers and employees, actively seeking work numbers have now fallen below pre-pandemic levels. Total employment has returned to 2019 levels, indicating that payroll scheme has achieved its aim of supporting a robust economic recovery. The recession and subsequent recovery have been uneven between sectors, and the hospitality, events and tourism sectors are still experiencing difficulties. The Visitor Accommodation Support Scheme will continue to support hotels facing detriment, and the Visitor Attractions and Events Scheme will support those firms who have been hard hit in the events sector. The economic recovery is not without challenges, however. As with many other advanced economies, Jersey saw a fall in inflation as demand was curtailed during the lockdowns and the uncertainty in 2020. Inflation has picked up again, hitting 3.5% in June and 2.9% in September. As demand recovers from the pandemic, short-term supply constraints look likely to push inflation higher next year, with Jersey's fiscal policy panel forecasting a temporary period of high inflation in 2022. In response to inflationary pressures in the UK, markets expect the Bank of England to raise interest rates early next year, if not sooner. Though it is fair to say that much of the current price pressure policies relates to global energy and commodity prices, which will not respond to UK monetary policy. Any increase to interest rates will, however, support the recovery of profits in the banking sector. House prices have continued to grow, driven in part by very low interest rates. This is in contrast to forecasts at the start of the pandemic, which were for a fall in house prices, both here and in other economies. The Bridging Island Plan sets out plans to build over 4,000 homes, including 1,500 affordable homes over the next 4 years. Andium and the States of Jersey Development Company will play a key role here, combining to deliver more than 900 affordable new homes by 2023. Looking forward, the Fiscal Policy Panel is forecasting a strong recovery in the coming years and said in their November report that they believe there are more upside risks than downside risks, which is welcome news after the challenges of Brexit and the pandemic. However, we have seen coronavirus case numbers increase in Jersey as we have come into the winter, and new mutations of the virus still pose a risk to the island. We must remain vigilant and continue to prioritise both lives and livelihoods. While the pandemic is not yet over, the unprecedented support provided by this government means the economy is well placed to recover strongly. As the focus moves from immediate emergency support into long-term economic renewal, this government plan dedicates significant resources to ensure that we build a vibrant and sustainable economy. For example, we will support economic renewal through an expansion of Jersey businesses' support services. We will also produce a roadmap for the recovery of the tourism sector, develop a new strategy for our retail sector, work towards implementing 5G to bolster our world-class connectivity, and invest in our arm's-length organisations to develop key sectors such as finance, hospitality, and digital. Before looking in more detail at the financial aspects of the plan, it is important that I set out our financial strategy for 2022 to 2025. This is framed around the following principles. The government proposes to borrow to cover the impact of COVID-19 on the public finances and for our hospital. We will fund our hospital through new debt and pay the costs using future returns on the Strategic Reserve Fund. Savings generated over the government plan period are the primary source of funding for new investment. Public finances should be balanced in 2024 to 2025, meaning expenditure should be equal to or less than income after depreciation. We will run deficits until the economy has recovered, in accordance with Fiscal Policy Panel advice, and we will refinance past service employees' pension liabilities to save money for future taxpayers. These are underpinned by the principles enshrined in the Public Finances Law to support long-term financial sustainability and the long-term well-being of islanders. This government plan is the final one of this current administration, and we remain focused on the commitments that we have supported the work of this government and that were established in our Common Strategic Policy of 2018. In our financial strategy, we have made it absolutely clear that we intend to run our finances at a deficit until we begin to see recovery. Nonetheless, it is our firm intention that we will return to balanced budgets over the period of this government plan. Due to our commitment to invest in public services and our common strategic priorities through savings and efficiencies, we are committed to not making any severe cuts to spending or significant increases in taxes to cover the deficits. Also, as I have said consistently throughout the pandemic, and I will reiterate it again, we will not be using the strategic reserve to meet the costs of the pandemic and other spending requirements. This is also in line with the recommendations of the Fiscal Policy Panel. The government plan also states that we should not undertake borrowing to fund recurring expenditure. And so, apart from responding to COVID-19 and the Our Hospital project, we expect our only additional borrowing will be to meet the cost of refinancing existing pensions liabilities. The strength of the strategic reserve and the investment returns on it are enabling us to finance the borrowing for our hospital, which was approved by the Assembly in October 2021. The pandemic has continued to have significant impacts on our finances, but to a lesser extent than previously envisaged. The net financial impact of the pandemic will peak at £209 million next year, with the final impact over the period 2020 to 2025 now estimated to be £177 million. I am pleased to report that this is significantly lower than was estimated in the previous government plan, as income has held up more strongly than anticipated. As you would expect, we are continuing to provide funding to cover the cost of responding to COVID-19 and its variants. For 2022, this will be £34 million of direct funding, with a further £53 million being held in reserve. This is the sensible approach, as we are still learning about the Omicron variant and its impact over the next few months, and there will be other variants appearing next year that we may also need to respond to. Turning to the refinancing of past service employee pension liabilities, we are proposing to pay them back more quickly. By taking this approach, we will incur much lower interest costs and achieve long-term cash savings estimated at more than £3.6 billion. I believe this is a prudent measure, if somewhat overdue. We have put in place a robust debt framework, and we have a plan to repay all of these borrowings. This ensures that we can afford the cost of the debt and that we will be able to repay it without replacing additional burdens on future generations. Now to reserves. In the government plan, we're forecasting a 2022 opening balance on the strategic reserve of more than £1 billion. And the Social Security Reserve Fund is forecast to have an opening balance of £2.1 billion. As I outlined in my speech at the start of last year's government plan debate, it is proposed that the state's grant should not be paid into the Social Security Fund in 2022 and 2023 to support the costs of the pandemic. As you will be aware, the grant was also not paid in 2021. This will allow an additional estimated £225 million to be allocated to urgent financial pressures. Spending and growth. This brings me to the issues of public spending and investment in our priorities. As I mentioned earlier, one of our priorities in 2022 will be responding to the economic and financial impact of the pandemic. During the next 3 years, we will fund new economic growth initiatives to drive the recovery, which build on the recommendations of the Economic Council. While the co-funded payroll scheme ceased at the end of October, other support schemes will continue to the end of March 2022. Eligible businesses, those still most affected by the pandemic, can also defer their social security contributions, and GST for the final quarter of 2021 and the first quarter of 2022 for up to 5 years. Affected businesses have until the 9th of January to apply for these deferrals. We have also been proactive in supporting our local economy through the Fiscal Stimulus Fund. 47 projects have received funding totaling nearly £30 million. As we intended, the funding is providing a much needed short-term boost to the economy. The majority of the projects will be completed in the first quarter of next year. In 2022, we will also focus on addressing long-term challenges and opportunities for our economy by delivering the island's first economic framework. This will provide a common vision and strategic objective for Jersey's future economy. Investment. In this government plan, we are continuing to invest in our future by delivering the priorities set out in the Common Strategic Policy 2018 to 2022. These include new initiatives funded in this government plan, continuing the projects identified in the last government plan, and the ongoing modernisation of the essential public services provided to islanders. The investment in our Common Strategic Policy priorities will total £45 million in 2022, £8 million identified in previous plans, and £37 million of new investments, including hospital financing costs. I will now go through these in more detail. Under Putting Children First, we will spend an additional £6.6 million over the next 4 years, with increased expenditure in 2022 estimated to be £1.1 million. In 2022, we will be providing extra investment for support services targeted at children who are most at risk, conducting a review of our school sites, and provide resource to mitigate increasing demographic pressures within the education system. This is in addition to the £35 million that will also be invested in programmes and projects that were included in last year's government plan. These include the Education Reform Programme, a redesign of CAMS, and implementing aspects of the care inquiry. To help improve islanders' well-being and mental and physical health, there will be additional spending of £41.2 million over the life of this government plan, with an estimated £17 million being spent next year. Along with continuing to fund the COVID-19 helpline, the Test and Trace programme, and vaccination and boosters for islanders, we will also be launching a Health and Social Recovery Fund and a Children's Health Recovery Plan. We will continue to implement the Jersey Care model, which will reduce dependency on secondary services by expanding primary and community services and provide more care in the community and at home. The Jersey Care Record will also be developed to integrate patient records in digital form so they can easily be accessible to both healthcare providers and patients. Creating a sustainable and vibrant economy will be more important than ever as we recover from the pandemic. And over the next 4 years, we will be looking to spend an additional £9.2 million. We are expecting to spend £2.5 million of this next year in 2022. Reducing income inequality and improving the standard of living for islanders remains a priority, and there will be an additional £4.2 million to support this until 2025. An expected £1.2 million of this will be spent in 2022. Finally, over the next 4 years, we'll be spending an additional £2.3 million on protecting and valuing our environment, and of this, an expected £1.5 million will be spent next year. There will also be £4.5 million from the Climate Emergency Fund to support new policies in 2022. These will promote a faster transition to low carbon travel and the introduction of more energy efficient heating and cooling systems. Modernising government. Next year, we will continue to support the government's ongoing commitment to deliver a modern and innovative public sector, which meets the needs of islanders. We will be building on the progress we have already made by our digital technology projects, such as the Integrated Technology Solution and the Cybersecurity Programme. If you have been past Cyril and Marcon House in the last few weeks, you will have noticed that work has started to demolish the building. This work will continue into next year, and then the new government offices will be constructed on the site. This new office development will bring together more than 1,600 public servants in one building, and it will create a central hub for islanders to access government services. It will also, on completion, free up current government office sites for development for housing. Our biggest asset as a government is our people, and we will continue to develop our employees and improve our services. We will carry on the work to update our policies to make the government an employer of choice, as well as providing training opportunities for all colleagues and nurture and promote talent to grow our own on-island skills. Additional spending over this plan period will be £12.9 million, with an estimated 3.4 million being spent next year. This excludes the borrowing costs for our hospital. Efficiencies and rebalancing. For the period of 2020 to 2021, we are on target to deliver £57 million in efficiency savings out of the original target of £60 million. The vast majority of these savings are recurring reductions. Given the context of the last 2 years, this is a significant achievement. This government plan continues to emphasise the need to secure efficiency measures to balance public finances, and therefore remains a central tenet of our financial strategy. There will be a further £20 million savings per year between 2022 and 2024, in addition to delivering the shortfall from the previous years. Now on to capital spending. This government plan provides for a bold programme of investment in capital projects. Included within this investment will, of course, be the funding to deliver our hospital. I am delighted that this government plan will realise our long-standing ambition to create a modern, fit-for-purpose hospital facility that is capable of supporting the provision of world-class healthcare services for decades to come. Alongside funding for our hospital, the government plan proposes £388 million of investment to deliver vital improvements to the island's infrastructure and the technology that underpins government services. New capital spending in this government plan has primarily been targeted towards delivering on the government's priority to put children first. Additional investment of £37 million is proposed to support new school and educational developments. Substantial investment is also provided for new and upgraded youth facilities. The proposed capital spending will continue to support the technological transformation of government. Investment totaling £96 million will be made in technology projects that will support a revolution in healthcare and, through the Integrated Technology Solution, to ensure the government systems meet our ambitions for a modern and effective public service. I'm pleased to say that funding is also proposed to allow us to breathe new life into some of our most precious heritage assets. Funding will enable new facilities to make Elizabeth Castle more accessible to islanders, and we will begin realising a new chapter for Fort Regent. I now turn to my specific budget proposals for 2022. Our fiscal position and tax system remain, by international standards, extremely stable. In line with Fiscal Policy Panel advice to avoid significant revenue raising in the short term, revenue increases in the government plan are restricted to increases in ANPO and only where there are good reasons for doing so. I recognise that many islanders have found themselves in a difficult financial position as a result of the pandemic, and it is right that we continue to provide breathing space to help them recover. Personal allowances. The Council of Ministers has decided to increase the main tax allowances by 3.3%, in line with the increase in the average earnings between June 2020 and June 2021. The increase means that the single person's allowance is increased by £550 to £16,550. The income exemption threshold for married couples and civil partners increases to £26,550. After a period of gradual convergence, the age-enhanced allowance for couples born before 1952 is now subsumed within the standard allowance. These proposed increases benefit around 46,000 taxpayers, reducing a single person's annual tax bill by around £140 and that of a married couple or civil partnership by £220. The allowances continue to compare favourably with Guernsey's proposed individual allowances for 2022 of £12,175 and the UK's current allowance of £12,570. I'm also proposing a £250 increase in the second earner's allowance to £6,550. This will maintain the parity between married couples and unmarried couples where both individuals are working. We increased the additional child allowance available to a single person last year to £4,590. A small change is made to the qualifying income threshold for childcare tax relief to ensure these two figures are once again aligned. Moving to independent taxation, 2021 has witnessed the start of one of the most fundamental changes to our personal tax system. I am delighted that in September we adopted P78, which set out the first two stages of the journey to full independent taxation. Following that decision, Revenue Jersey started an awareness campaign, telling islanders how these changes may affect them. We held a number of roadshow events across the island, a live stream event, which around 1,500 people joined for parts of the session, and launched an online tax calculator, allowing islanders to assess the final financial impact of independent taxation. In 2022, the next government will need to bring forward the remaining legislation to complete this work and to initiate the proposed compensatory allowance, which will help ensure that taxpayers are not materially financially disadvantaged when independent taxation becomes mandatory. This will be something for the new Assembly to consider early in its term. I want to reaffirm my commitment to providing that allowance to ensure 7,000 or so lower income couples who would otherwise financially lose out are protected for a transitional period of at least 10 years. A review will be conducted before the end of the transitional period to see whether the allowance needs to continue beyond the 10 years. Prior year basis, PYB. The introduction of independent taxation has been made easier by our previous decision to remove the prior year basis of paying taxes. The Treasury will be writing to former PYB taxpayers during 2022 to provide more information about the options which will become available to repay the frozen 2019 prior year basis tax liability. A range of payment options will be made available during 2024, while those who want to start repaying earlier will be able to do so. Business interest rules. Turning now to some of the specific measures. The draft finance law enhances existing rules that allow relief for interest paid in respect of businesses' borrowing costs. Historically, some rules were set out in extra statutory concessions published by the Comptroller. In the modern world, it is right that these fundamental provisions are given the full backing of statute. Provisions affected in this way include the rules for allowing relief to be claimed for interest paid where a property is acquired as part of a commercial letting business and where shares in a trading company are acquired and the borrower is working in the business. Personal tax residence. A review of extra statutory concessions given by the Comptroller of Taxes over the years has been underway since 2017. This year's finance law begins the process to put more of our professional tax residence rules on a firmer statutory footing. In addition, where a person arrives or leaves Jersey during the year, their income and allowances will be apportioned by days of residence rather than by completed weeks. This provision does not extend to so-called high-value residents who have access to the preferential tax regime by virtue of having been admitted to Jersey under the high-value residence scheme. This much-needed modernisation work will continue in 2022 and beyond. I now turn to AMPO, or excise duties. The Council of Ministers has considered carefully the matter of duties and their impact on certain sectors, but also their impact on people's health and our environment. It is normal practice to revalorize excise duties to maintain their real value. As with 2020, the hospitality sector in particular has continued to struggle towards recovery in 2021. The government plan proposes freezing duties on all strengths of beer and cider, but proposes an increase of 5% for wines and spirits, which have a higher alcohol content. The Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel has suggested a different tack in Amendment 24 to the proposed government plan, which would see an across-the-board increase of 2.5% to alcohol duties, which the Council of Ministers is asking members to reject. Tobacco. Once again, the Council of Ministers is resolute in its position of applying above-inflation increases to tobacco duties, which is consistent with the Tobacco Strategy 2017 to 2022. I am therefore increasing the duty on cigarettes by 9.5% and on cigars and hand-rolling tobacco by 13.5%. This represents an extra 65% on a pack of 20 cigarettes. Fuel. The government is committed to above-inflation increases in fuel duty to fund work to tackle climate change and discourage the demand for fossil fuels. We are continuing to apply the strategy of increasing by RPI, plus a real increase within this year is proposed at 3 pence per litre. The cost of a litre of petrol or diesel will therefore increase by around 5 pence. The additional 3 pence will be allocated to the Climate Emergency Fund, helping fund future actions relating to the climate emergency. Vehicle emissions duty, which is payable when a vehicle is first registered in the island, will also increase for non-commercial vehicles from April 2022. This is to discourage the purchase of vehicles that emit high levels of CO2, or at least to help recover the costs of their impact to the general taxpayer. The additional revenue from this increase will also be put into the Climate Emergency Fund. While our carbon neutral roadmap continues to be developed, there are no proposed increases to the VED rate for commercial vehicles. In fact, VED rates will be reduced for those commercial vehicles that meet the highest Euro emissions standards. GST. It is a long-standing commitment of successive governments since GST was introduced to quickly follow the EU. And now, post-Brexit, the UK is reducing the discrimination in favour of goods imported personally by islanders. The GST de minimis level exists only as an administrative easement to ensure we do not spend more collecting GST at our borders than the GST is worth. The UK abolished its version of the de minimis level in January 2021, and the EU followed suit in July 2021. Now, in most cases, large retailers across Europe are charging VAT at the point of sale according to the rate of VAT in force at the point of destination of the goods. We are now asking them to do the same for Jersey at marginal cost. This finance law creates an obligation on all larger offshore retailers to register for GST from 2023, where their annual supplies into Jersey are expected to exceed £300,000. A year's clear notice of this change, placed in statute, will allow the affected businesses to make any required changes to their systems and procedures over the course of 2022. This will allow the largest offshore retailers to charge GST at the point of sale and remit the tax direct to our exchequer. I recognise, of course, that this is not a universally popular development, but it will ensure goods have the smoothest passage through Jersey customs that is possible. It does remove more discrimination from our tax system, and it does improve the revenues available for our public services. Smaller retailers below the £300,000 threshold would be able to register for GST voluntarily to benefit in the same way. If they do not register voluntarily, then, as now, it will remain the responsibility of the Jersey customer to pay the import GST if it exceeds the GST de minimis level. It is expected these changes will then make it viable for Jersey Customs to operate with a lower GST de minimis level for imported, unaccompanied goods for personal use, and I have asked officers to take the necessary steps to reduce the de minimis level from £135 to £60 with effect from January 2023. I do want to make two things clear. Firstly, I recognise the steps. Firstly, I personally remain absolutely committed to working for the abolition of the GST de minimis level as soon as possible to create increasingly fair competition in our marketplace. I welcome the support of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel for this position. I have asked Revenue Jersey and Jersey Customs to review their experience of operating the £60 level during 2023 and to consider the scope for a further reduction or complete abolition. Secondly, in light of further representations from states members and stakeholders, I have asked Revenue Jersey to review the case for limiting the availability of the GST de minimis level only to islanders importing goods for private use from small, unregistered retailers. This may enable larger offshore retailers to charge GST on all of their supplies, regardless of value. This does not affect the draft finance law, which we will be considering after this debate. Tax policy plans for 2022. I would like to say something about our tax policy development plans for 2022. Among the priority work, I have asked Treasury officers to prioritise the following, which I believe will be important items for the next government's first government plan and for early consideration by the next States Assembly. Firstly, the stamp duty review. I recognise the cost of housing in Jersey is of pressing importance, and I share the desire of most states members for change, particularly to dampen down the buy-to-let market, which may improve the availability of housing for first-time buyers at less inflated prices. The Council of Ministers amendment to Amendment 22 registers our belief that such changes do need careful, albeit speedy, consideration and an appropriate level of public and business engagement on the best ways ahead. As I have already mentioned, work will continue to deliver independent taxation, including the compensatory allowance. On the tax technical side, we will undertake a review of the tax appeals provisions, which I discussed with the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel in October. Public consultations will also be carried out on tax administration proposals for partnerships and the corporate income tax filing deadline. And finally, in relation to the climate emergency, work is underway to find a long-term substitute for fuel duty, both to maintain government revenues and to support our environmental objectives. The lead policy options, to my mind, remain some form of road user charging or a tax on car ownerships. And finally, sir, you'll be pleased to hear in conclusion, our finances are stable and well established, as has been recognised by our latest Standard & Poor's rating, which remains unchanged and strong. Through careful fiscal management, we continue to build on our strategic priorities and the future prosperity of the island. The government plan has been constructed and agreed by the Council of Ministers, and we present this to the Assembly together. I commend this plan and the finance measures that underpin it to the Assembly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir, it is.
There is an amendment, the first listed in the running order for the government plan, the 22nd amendment, lodged by the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. There is an amendment to this amendment lodged by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Senator Moore, do you accept that amendment?
No, sir, we don't.
Very well. Well, then I ask the greffier to read the 22nd amendment.
1, page 2, paragraph A, after the words Article 928 of the law, insert the words with the proposed taxation and import duties changes to include the introduction following a review by the Minister for Treasury and Resources and no later than the 31st December 2022 of a higher stamp duty rate for buy-to-let investment properties, second homes and holiday homes. 2, page 3, paragraph L, after the words to the report, insert the words except that on page 155 of Appendix 3, after the words this review will conclude in 2022, there shall be inserted the words the Minister for Treasury and Resources will introduce a higher stamp duty rate for buy-to-let investment properties, second homes and holiday homes, no later than 31 December 2022, in addition to any further changes to Appendix 3 identified as required by the Council Ministers to reflect the implementation of such a policy.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. The Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel has long called for action to be taken by the government in regard to stamp duty and land transaction tax. We have identified that it can be used not only as a revenue raising measure, but also as a means to guide the property market. It has been well rehearsed that the island is facing unprecedented demand for residential property, with this showing no sign of slowing. Indeed, the house price index for the third quarter of 2021 has shown overall housing market activity on a rolling 4-quarter basis to be 40% higher than in the corresponding quarter of 2020. It is clear that timely actions to reduce the continued demand and increasing property prices is needed. The panel believes that introducing a higher rate of stamp duty and LTT for buy-to-let investment properties, second homes and holiday homes will aid in reducing demand for those properties, allowing the property market to be fairer to first-time buyers and owner-occupiers. The definition of those purchases impacted by this amendment can be identified as those in which a property is purchased specifically to let or any other residential property other than a main residence. The panel would highlight that the fastest growing area of the economy is currently the buy-to-let market, placing investors in competition with people who are trying to purchase their home in a rapidly increasing market. The introduction of a higher rate is not unprecedented. In the UK, HM Treasury announced the introduction of a stamp duty land tax on the purchase of additional properties in 2015. In that jurisdiction, it is 3% higher than standard stamp duty. It has been highlighted that the changes in the UK resulted in an increased sale to owner-occupiers or to more sanguine, less affected landlords, and reduced overall residential property transactions. Indeed, there was a drop in the ratio of buy-to-let mortgage completions to 8% in April 2016 versus 18% that took place in February 2016. The panel has not proposed a specific higher rate for the Minister to implement, which it had intended and wished to do, sir. However, we would suggest 2% to be a fair amount. The panel leaves this to the Minister for Treasury and Resources to calculate. The additional revenue raised by the higher rates could be used in many ways to aid islanders, for example, in affordable housing schemes. In summary, this amendment is a call to action requiring the Minister for Treasury and Resources to bring about changes to combat an issue that is of vital importance to islanders. It will allow up to a year for these changes to be implemented. And the panel commend it to the Assembly.
Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. There is an amendment to the amendment brought by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Ask the Greffier to read the amendment to the amendment.
1, page 2, part 1, after the words "the proposed taxation and import duty changes" to include the introduction, delete the word "following" and insert the word "subject to," and after the words "following a review by the Minister for Treasury and Resources and no later than," delete the date 31st December 2022 and insert the date 1st January 2024. 2, page 2, part 2, after the words "this review will conclude in 2022," there shall be inserted the words "subject to the outcome of this review, the Minister for Treasury and Resources will propose a higher rate of stamp duty for buy-to-let investment properties, second homes and holiday homes no later than 1st January 2024.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. The Council of Ministers has sympathy with the desire expressed by the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel amendment for action to address Jersey's housing problems, which were well articulated in the report of the Housing Policy Development Board earlier this year. That report concluded that increases in stamp duty were not the most viable way forward for affecting the housing market, without better understanding of the views of the public. In particular, the buy-to-let market remains fully in the sights of the proposed stamp duty review, during which fuller public engagement is envisaged. The review was delayed by COVID-related reprioritisation, but is now scheduled to take place during 2022, with a view to public engagement and a consultation taking place in 2023. Measures being brought forward in the draft government plan for 2024. Any tax measures would be presented in the draft finance law for 2024, which the Assembly will debate in December 2023. I would stress that a healthy private sector rental market is an important component of a healthy housing market. But equally, we recognise that the demand from investors and aspiring private landlords is contributing towards house price inflation and making it more difficult for younger islanders to get on the housing ladder. The government has already announced a review of stamp duty and land transaction tax in the draft government plan to improve matters. On the matter of these taxes, I would ask the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel to bear with us while the full review is undertaken. Were their amendment to succeed without the amendment suggested by the Council of Ministers, then the implementation project to deliver this change to the structure of stamp duty, involving quite complicated legislative changes to define scope and to prevent avoidance, would take officers away from that more fundamental review. Unaltered, the CSSP amendment also seems to deny the possibility that public engagement on this issue might lead to a different conclusion, and I want to make it clear that there would indeed be limited scope during 2022 for full engagement with stakeholders and the public, given the constraints of election purdah. Sir, I ask all members to support this amendment to Amendment 2020 to Amendment 22. Thank you.
Minister, is that the amendment to the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. The Corporate Services Panel is disappointed that the Minister has chosen to propose delaying action to reduce property demand and rebalancing the market towards owner-occupiers and first-time buyers. The panel lodged its amendment to introduce a higher rate of stamp duty and LTT for buy-to-let investment properties, second homes and holiday homes, following continued promises of reviews in this area, but very little action from this alliance government. The government plan 2020 to 23 indicated that the Housing Policy Development Board is continuing to develop its work around housing policy, stamp duty and land transaction tax are within the scope of the board's work. A review of stamp duty was specifically proposed in the government plan 21 to 24, indicating that it would start in 2021. Review of stamp duty and land transaction tax and the taxation of enveloped property outlined in the government plan 22 to 25 stated that the review would conclude in next year. However, the report to the amendment indicates that consultation on the matter will now not take place until 2023. As noted by the panel, reviews in this area have been numerous. We specifically link to R101 of 2014, the property tax review, in our report as an example. The panel surmises that the information pertaining to the information required for implementation on differing rates is already in the government's possession. The panel had originally considered requiring the Minister to bring forward changes earlier in 2022. However, agreed to allow time to ascertain necessary legislative elements. This time can be used by the Treasury and Exchequer to collate the existing information that they already hold. Although the panel would suggest that consultation may have already taken place as part of the previous government's work, this time could also be used to gain further views on the matter. And in fact, we have had to point out to the Minister and her team on several occasions that the consultations they have conducted on serious and major new issues of policy, sir, have been carried out in periods of time that have not met their own consultation guidelines. So they clearly don't have a problem with undertaking quick reviews and consultations. So the panel would suggest that the consultation may have already taken place as part of the previous apologies. The panel was surprised that it is the view of the Minister that she's unable to carry out consultation concurrently during next year and aims to ask the Treasury and Exchequer to do so in 2023 instead. The panel would highlight that if adopted, the implementation of any different rates would be subject to the Minister's review. This risks that no action will be taken at all. The amendment to the amendment notes that the panel's proposal would require redeployment of resources from existing tax policy development work. The panel believes that the importance of providing a steer to the housing market indeed warrants this action. In all, if this amendment to the amendment is accepted, it will allow 2 further years of inaction by the Minister. The panel's amendment, as proposed, will allow the Minister to carry out a review and consultation in a timelier fashion. If the Minister is unable to conduct the work prior to the next government term, the next Minister should be in a position to decide what action to take. The panel asks the Assembly to reject this amendment to the amendment.
Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And I completely agree with what Senator Moore has just said. And I listened intently to the Treasury Minister and remain unconvinced by the case that she made. However, she did make one point, which I thought was very interesting, and it certainly demonstrates some progress in the attitudes that there are when it comes to the housing crisis. In fact, by the end of this week, they might even be calling it that, though they aren't at this point. But the Treasury Minister said that the government accepts that the levels of buy-to-let are affecting young people's opportunities in purchasing homes. And or she said something along those lines anyway, which I think was something I was pleased to hear her say, because I think most people will recognise that that is the case, and that the problem in housing in Jersey is not just about the supply, but it is also about the distribution of the supply that we do already have, where young people can go to buy their first property and find that they are outbid by somebody who's got capital they can fall back on and can therefore offer more to be able to get that property. And then when they do get that property, they can rent it out at a level that is above what the mortgage repayments would be if it were an owner-occupier property, which is causing inflation and is depriving people of opportunities to buy their homes. So for a government minister to recognise that is a good thing. Then the government says, but we're going to do nothing about it for a longer period of time than is necessary. So I'm very pleased that the scrutiny panel has proposed this measure. I think the timescale that they've proposed could be delivered upon, and the government amendment is simply to kick the can down the road and not deal with this issue and leave the problem to get worse and worse in the meantime. The minister referred to the ongoing review on stamp duty and said that it's possible it could reach other conclusions. Well, I'd happily put down a bit of money on that as a bet that in fact it won't reach other conclusions, it will reach this. And so that begs the question, why do we constantly have to delay action whilst we review, consult, when sometimes the answers are actually just staring us in the face? And it would be a better demonstration of leadership to say, okay, there are perhaps other things that we can be looking at with stamp duty too, but it's obvious that this is part of the solution. It's obvious that this is one of those conclusions that it's going to reach. So let's just get on with it. Let's take that action to benefit those people seeking to buy their own homes, to give them an advantage when trying to purchase them. And let's do that sooner rather than later. So, sir, I'd urge the Assembly to reject the amendment from the Council of Ministers and put their wholehearted support behind the scrutiny panel's amendment unamended.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Yes, Chief Minister, if I could ask members to indicate in the chat, because otherwise I'll lose.
Yeah, so I think there's a delay. I can see on my screen. Thank you, sir. Just to be very, very clear, I have absolutely no issues with the concept of this amendment. In fact, I don't think any ministers do, sir. Hang on a moment. So all we're trying to do is bring an element of realism to the debate, and also to be, I'll use the word coherent, perhaps consistent. And what I just want to do, so if I can just try and find my note, is obviously read the amendment that we are being asked to consider without, sorry, the unamended amendment, so that we are being asked to consider if the amendment of the Treasury Minister isn't accepted. And basically it says that with the proposed taxation and pay duty changes to include the introduction following a review by the Minister for TNR and no later than 31st December of a higher stamp duty rate for buy-to-let investment properties, second homes and holiday homes. So the point is, is that in this instance, bear in mind the government plan is already alluding to a review taking place. This is suggesting that the Treasury Minister, Treasury Resources Minister performs a review and then implements a higher rate of stamp duty. In other words, it is predetermining the outcome. So there's two elements to it. One is it is predetermining the outcome and saying, actually, this is a good idea. Now, that is, both of these legitimately a decision for the Assembly. But usually, sir, we are criticised for having reviews which are then have got a predetermined outcome. In other words, why bother having the review? Because actually, we've made the decision. Secondly, sir, is the date. And I'll deal with the latter first. At the end of the day, we have basically 4 months left of work before the basically PERDA period. And by that I'm saying, so obviously We get to the end of this week, we're basically into the Christmas week. That's it till January. And then we have January, February, March and April. And on the 10th of May, we go into Purdah, or whatever the expression is for it these days. We emerge from that on around the middle of July. We have the summer recess, and at that point, the new council ministers, the new assembly, and the new scrutiny panels will be very much focused on the new CSP and the government plan. So there is a lot of work that will be going on in that period, of which a chunk of time has been taken out for, as we know, the election process. And so, sir, from a realism point of view, on the basis that on these type of areas, one is meant to consult and go through that process, it is purely a realism, on a note of realism, to suggest that actually, bearing in mind, it will be a decision not of this assembly ultimately, but it will be a decision of the next assembly and of the next Treasury Minister, whoever that is, to consider the outcomes and to determine whether there is further work to be done and how they want to implement it. So that is why, sir, we were suggesting a realism of actually implementing it in a government plan of to be debated at the end of 2023 and in fact implemented on the 1st of January 2024, rather than trying to implement it effectively on the 1st of January 2023 with the various time issues that I have referred to. And the other point in terms of one of the issues around just understanding the unintended consequences, and I'm just going to try and refer, I believe, hopefully to part of the scrutiny report. It does say that the panel has, through correspondence with the Legislative Drafting Office, ascertained that further time is required to review the legislative elements that would be required upon implementation of a higher rate of stamp duty in Jersey. In other words, there are some complications to it. It is not something that will be easy, as straightforward as we might all imagine. The second point, which is around unintended consequences, which is a direct quote that says, yes, there's the point that the centre has made around the change in percentages on buy-to-let homes, but it also says it should be pointed out that the introduction of the surcharge will potentially have a knock-on effect on longer-term revenues from the UK SDLT. And so I think the point there is that there is a recognition that on these things sometimes there are unintended consequences which we possibly haven't considered, and therefore, sir, that is the only other reason on a precautionary basis we're suggesting that having that extra bit of time and making sure that it's not a predetermined outcome, that in other words, to do it properly. Now, sir, there will be allegations saying that's delay, prevarication, and all that type of stuff. I make the point absolutely, sir, that from my perspective, inherently as a concept, I've got absolutely no objection to it whatsoever. I don't think it's a panacea. I don't think it's going to solve the housing problem. And indeed, sir, what I will say, which I'm sure there will be a number of members who are delighted to hear this update, is that imminently I'm expecting a ministerial decision to come to my desk, which will change the policy of PAYWAG to end share transfer, and therefore to end that element of the buy-to-let market, or sorry, the ability to do buy-to-let on that area in Jersey. I expect that to be with me sometime in the next few days. That is a tangible and quick action that we are taking. As I said, some of them, others take longer if you want to make sure about unintended consequences. So, sir, in principle, absolutely no problem with the concept. I think I note that the panel does not recommend, it suggests a 2% rate, does not recommend an additional rate. I would suggest any review might wish to consider that, and usually that requires consultation. And that is why, sir, bearing in mind there will be a large chunk of next year that will be taken up by both Purdah, the consequences afterwards of establishing a new council ministers, and the fact that that council ministers will be required to produce a common strategic policy, a new government plan, which will include an update to population as well. That will be a considerable amount of work to do in the period from, let's say, August to December of next year. if the Assembly wishes to ignore that, that's purely, if you like, a suggestion from ourselves. That's very much a matter of the Assembly, but it will add quite significant consequences, I suspect, onto the workload that future members will face. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. And what a classic speech we've just heard there. 7 minutes to say next to nothing and to excuse this Chief Minister from doing anything at all to help, not to solve. We're not talking some pantomime fairies magic wand. No, it's not going to solve the entire housing problem that we have, housing crisis that we have, but it might help to go some way to doing it. And the sooner we start that, the sooner we can get it done. Not only that, but this Chief Minister, now it won't be the only minister that we'll hear in this debate as we go through it, who will find any number of reasons not to do anything. Won't be the first time or the last. We're going to hear it all through this. But actually managed to extend PERDA by 4 months. Effectively saying, we're not doing it now because we'll be into PERDA in 4 months' time. Well, hang on, now is not 4 months' time. So let's all stop, all departments, all ministers, stop work now. Waiting, anticipating PERDA. It's on its way. We won't take any serious judgments in that time. So let's just stop now. Sit on our hands and do nothing. That's the formula being proposed by the Chief Minister today, now, as we've just seen. 7 minutes to say, I'm doing nothing, even though I'm in favour of this move in principle. Oh, come on. Pull the other one, please. I've heard that too often. And it's the last resort of somebody who's losing the argument, suspects they're going to lose the argument because the argument actually makes sense the other way around. And it just says, do nothing. I haven't got the staff. I haven't got the staff to do anything. It says we're going to be vastly busy doing other things. Well, I'm sorry, but if you can't actually do any initiatives in response to what this chamber says, because you're understaffed, then that's your fault. Get some more staff and get it done. If this body says this is the way forward, we want you to do it, then do it. Thank you.
I remind members to address remarks through the chair, please. Conor Tarverson.
Thank you, sir. Quite sure what to say following the last speech, but I think to get back some facts on this. I mean, from my point of view, I think the proposition and the amendment both make sense to me. The buy-to-let market is an investment market, and I think there is scope for the government to take money out of that in terms of taxation on property transaction costs. So I do not think that we should kid ourselves that actually that's going to have much effect on the market, because the market is largely driven by the lack of interest rate returns in the banking market or deposit market, and investors are simply looking for higher yields by investing in properties which they can rent out between 3 and 4% compared with the probably 0.5% they can get in the bank. So I think a 2% upfront charge is going to benefit the government more greatly, and will have less impact on the dynamics of the market. I mean, it will add an additional cost, and it may perhaps put some people off, but it's unlikely to put many people off. So I think if we want to have a real impact on Jersey's housing crisis, frankly, we need to build more houses, because the dynamic is driven by the fact that we have lots of people looking for property, either to rent or to buy, and there's a shortage of property, and the market dynamics just simply drives the price upwards and takes it out of a large number of people's affordability zones. And we can see the impact on people leaving the island, and indeed suffering in the housing market. Now, I think, there'll be a lot of criticism of the government, we're not doing anything. Well, actually, and I see Deputy Labby is due to speak in a few minutes. My view is that the Housing Minister is doing everything he can to increase supply. And whilst I will support both the amendment and the proposition, to my mind, that's the way forward, is to bring more houses to the market. and provide more homes for islanders either to rent or to buy, because there's no doubt in my mind that they're desperately needed at the moment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Conor Deputy Levy.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to bring the Assembly up to date with what I'm doing in this area. I've spoken about it quite a lot with the scrutiny panel that examines me. And I've said always on this issue that if one person's nice to have second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever buy-to-let property is depriving another person of their necessity to actually get a foot on the housing ladder, then that isn't ethical. And since the last house price index came out in August, I've led discussions on the Council of Ministers, looking at ways in which we could try to restrict slightly the buy-to-let market. The Constable of St Warren is absolutely right. We're in a low inflation environment. We have been for some time. It's more attractive to put your money in property than it is to leave it in the bank. And that's why we are where we are, along with many other places around the world. So what we recently engaged Arup to scope, as I signalled, a market review of what commercial financial mortgage products are available in the island for first-time buyers, what products aren't available here but are available elsewhere, and it would be good if they were available here, and what we can do about that, how best we can use the 10 million coming on stream next year and the year after to assist people buy their first property, how best do we target that money. Arup is doing that work. They're also, we've broadened the scope of that review to look at how we can use allocated funds for flipping properties that aren't currently being used to get them back into domestic use. And we've also asked them to take a look at the buy-to-let issue on the island, and they're working right now, and they're going to just extended it beyond Christmas because we added the buy-to-let thing to their terms of reference, and we have scoped some ideas already, some ideas that have got majority appeal to the Council of Ministers. But I do disagree with Senator Mezek on this issue in terms of, and Deputy Southern, you know, let's just do it. We don't need to consult. We don't need to review. We absolutely do need to consult on this. We do need to establish the intended consequences as well as the unintended consequences. What is it going to do to the rental market? The last thing we want to do is put rental prices up. Where, you know, will the cost be passed on? How do we stop that from happening? Obviously, stamp duty, tax levers like this are an obvious way to try to take the heat out of the buy-to-let market a little bit, but there are other measures that we can put in place. I won't speculate on them because I don't want to set the hairs running, but we absolutely fully have to consult on them and really explore the all the consequences, and that's being done as we speak. But I'm quite impatient to get results on this. And I'm working towards it. So I just wanted to bring the Assembly up to date on that, and I will update them when I get the results of the Arup review very early in the new year. And if we think it's a good idea, I mean, I just think if it was as hard and fast and simple as Senator Mezek indicates in his speech just now, why didn't the Policy Development Board make a definite recommendation on that? But they did, I think, allude to us looking into it, and that is what we're doing. And I just wanted to update the Assembly on that fact. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. My point simply is that I am concerned that the proposal embraces buy-to-let investment properties, second homes and holiday homes. There is justification, obviously, to encourage the buy-to-let market because there is a need for landlords, but I am concerned that the same treatment is being given to second homes and holiday homes, and I question why people should be able to have second home or holiday homes on the island, and some more fundamental appraisal of that facility, if it does exist, needs to be carried out. I have to say I'm not unsure as to which way I'm going to vote on this. I accept the need for a root and branches review of the whole situation. As against that, I see the need to show to the public at large that this matter is being taken seriously, and that in a fairly general way, the original amendment seems to do that. But I will hear what other people have to say first. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak, Senator Pallett. Oh, sorry, that was a question. Is it, Senator?
Sorry, no, sir. I had it in my box, but I do wish to speak.
Well then, very well. Please speak.
I'm going to be very brief. Members of the public listening to this debate know very well that there are a large number of members that are landlords and have second homes, and I think are looking at a beady eye on what goes on within the Assembly. We do need to start taking action in the housing market, and as much as I accept some of what has been said by the Chief Minister and others, all I ever hear is delay. This is going to be yet another area where this alliance-led government is going to delay. I'm pleased that the Chief Minister mentioned that there's going to be some move in changing the share market, but I personally I think it's because this government's being dragged kicking and screaming into making changes, making moves towards making the housing market fairer, not because they want to do it, but because they have no choice but to do it, because it's in such a mess. It isn't a problem, it is a crisis, and at some point, some ministers are going to have to understand that Rome is burning, and the island, in terms of the housing market for both socially rented and for people to buy, is in an absolute mess. Members really need to support this. It is a small measure towards hopefully making some small changes to the market. Small changes lead to bigger changes. But to do nothing is just not good enough. We had a long debate in corporate services around this particular amendment, and I think we're unanimous in terms of wanting this to be done in the shortest possible time frame. So I would urge members, please reject this amendment. What we need to do is make sure that we can provide some comfort to people that are looking for homes, that people are listening, people in this Assembly are listening, people in government are listening, because they are looking at the actions we are taking in the run-up to the next election, and we really need to start taking some action. Deputy Southern's quite right. There's 4 months to go before we go into Purdah. Let's not keep delaying things. Let's do something.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Masson.
Thank you, sir. One wonders whether the council members can't win, because the very members of this Assembly who have criticised other government programmes because there hasn't been enough consultation, because they haven't done this, that or whatever properly, because not enough time was devoted to developing plans. So now the council ministers are going, OK, this is a good idea, but we want to be able to refine it and we want to talk to the relevant people. Now those same members are saying, oh, you're not going fast enough. Just unbelievable, sir. Thank you.
Oh, well. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Deputy Warwood.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to say, I think there's a lack of understanding as to what the issue is here. Things can be agreed with. I can agree with lots of things at home. I've agreed for the last, if I'm honest, 2 years to fix a small hole in these kitchen ceiling. I agreed. I think it's exactly the right thing to do. I think it should be done. I think we need to commit to it. I think it would improve the home, but I haven't done it. And that's because I've delayed and I've delayed it and I put it off and I put it off and I put it off. I hope no one's listening to this at home. And so we've got a parallel here. Person after person supporting government from this government is saying, well, this is just delaying it a little. And so I'm going to reiterate something. We've got, what, 6 months left. Now should be the time for urgency, for taking action so that there is some form of positive legacy on these things. Let's take the action. Let's actually do this now rather than delaying for a time so far in the future. We can't actually see that this will happen. And so I urge people to reject these amendments for exactly the reason as to why we reject all delays in actually taking action from this assembly. People sat out there don't want to see this delay. They want to see a small action taken. It's not going to solve the housing problem. It's not going to solve the housing crisis, whatever you want to call it. However, it's going to be part of a solution. And that's the key. So I urge members to reject the amendment to this amendment and go with the main one. Thank you, sir.
Another member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. I don't want to comment or repeat every contributor's comments, but I thank them for them, and to Senator Mesek for recognition of my position with reference to young people and property. But as the Council of Ministers amendment has explained in its amendment to Amendment 22, that timing is of the issue here. There has been a difficulty where scrutiny, CSSP, has asked for full consultation and engagement with the public in many topics. And that is what we're trying to do with this amendment, is to extend the period. A quick review on something that affects taxation, stamp duty, quite significantly is not the way forward. And whilst I agree with some members' comments that it's review after review and the extent of the reviews, we have had the rather extreme distraction of a pandemic, which has delayed quite a significant amount of business as normal. So, sir, I do think we need to examine this correctly, the significant impacts that it might have on the finance industry, on people individually, across the board. And so I will ask for the consultation, as in the amendment, will be extended for the next 2 years. And I commend the amendment to the Assembly. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Thank you very much, Minister. I'd ask the Greffier to place a voting link into the chat. The vote is on the amendment to the amendment. That is the amendment to the 22nd amendment. And I open the voting and ask members to vote. Right, we're not going to go until we have a reasonable number who voted.
Sir,
Yeah.
So, Deputy Young here. Apologies. The link we've been sent says Amendment 21. Can I just clarify that we're voting on Amendment 22, the amendment to Amendment 22? Have I got that right?
The link that you have, it may say that it is actually relates to the 22nd amendment, the amendment to the 22nd amendment. It may be wrongly titled, but that's what we're voting on at the moment.
Thank you. Well, thank you, sir.
On 32.
Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 13 votes pour, 19 votes contre within the link, a further 5 votes pour and 2 votes contre within the chat.
Can we have the vote, please, sir?
The which ones? Both ways.
Yes, both ways, please, sir.
Both ways.
Okay, those members who voted pour, Senator Le Fondre, Deputy Wickenden, Constable of St. Juan, Deputy Lewis, Deputy of St. Peter, Deputy Guida, Deputy Martin, Constable of St. Clements, Constable of St. Brelard, Deputy Labbe, Deputy of St. Juan, Senator Farnham, and the Constable of Trinity. And in the chat, also votes pour from Deputy Masson, Deputy Ash, Deputy Pennell, Senator Ferguson, and the Deputy of Trinity. The members who voted contra were Deputy Aye, Constable of St. John, Constable of Grouvale, Constable of St. Helier, Deputy Higgins, the Constable of St. Lawrence, the Deputy of St. Martin, Senator Moore, Deputy Lahegre, Senator Valvar, Senator Mezek, Deputy Ward, Deputy Gardner, Deputy Pamplin, Senator Pallett, the Constable of St. Mary, Deputy Southern, Constable of St. Martin, Deputy Truscott, and in the chat, the Constable of St. Saviour, Deputy of St. and the Deputy of St. Mary.
Very well. We now resume the debate on the amendment, the 22nd amendment, which is not amended. Does any member wish to speak on the 22nd amendment? Deputy of St. Martin.
Thank you, sir, and I won't speak for long, but I just want to reiterate some points that Senator Pallett made, and more especially a point that Deputy Ward made, that this is a small change, if you like, and it's one of many, very many small changes we need to make in order to even to start to address this housing crisis. But it is one that needs to be made. It's a small tweak to things like stamp duty, and stamp duty is an issue that we need to look at, not just for buy-to-let, but for other issues as well. So I encourage members to continue to support this amendment. It's a very small step in the right direction. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the 22nd amendment? No other member wishes to speak? No other member wishes to speak? Oh, sorry. No. Yes, it's all right. My screen has freed up again now. So, Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Just very, very briefly to say that I hope that members who have acknowledged previously that the principle behind what the scrutiny panel are trying to do with this amendment is the right thing to do will stay strong and vote in favour of this amendment, even with the Treasury Minister's amendment having been rejected. The scrutiny panel have made the case in support of this. The Assembly has said we would prefer not to have delay on this. So I hope that members will stick to this and get it across the line so that we can take at least one tangible step to alleviating the housing crisis in one form or another. So I'll be wholeheartedly supporting this amendment.
Deputy St. Juan.
Thank you, sir. And there's one point I'd like to make, which I've made before, and that is when we have these debates about stamp duty, we tend always to think about people purchasing property. And we forget that this stamp duty regime also affects people who are registering wills. And surreptitiously, we are creating, as the rates of stamp duty go up and up, we are creating a tax on inheritance. Now, that may be something that's desirable, but we've never had a debate on that. And I think we need to be mindful of this, because we just think this is about people purchasing property. This is about people with money. This is about people coming to the island, buying up our property. This is about people unnecessarily buying second homes. But what we are doing, we're also impacting on people inheriting property. Now, is that something we want to do? That's a different question that deserves consideration. Because what it may do, if rates of stamp duty get too high, is that it will disincentivize people from making wills. Because if it becomes too expensive for the people you want to inherit to register their will, it is possible that some testators will not register a will. Now, you can do that. You can die without leaving a will, and what happens is that people will inherit who are the heirs at law. They don't have to pay anything because they're not registering anything. So there's no inheritance tax, if you like, for them. But you might not want your heirs at law to inherit. You might want a favourite nephew to inherit or something similar. And this issue tends to affect people who don't have direct family. Their choices in this are being inhibited. So that is my concern, that we are effectively entering a regime in which we are discouraging people from making wills. And it is always desirable that people make wills because it means that their wishes can be carried out. And it means that there is certainty as well as to the ownership of land, and you're not, because it is recorded and something is registered. Now, some might say, well, people are getting the benefits of a valuable property, so they should pay the same as everyone else. And that is true. Those receiving property under a will are getting that benefit. But my point is, it's not their choice, if you like. They are different to those who are buying a second home or buying an investment property. They haven't chosen to inherit, but they are receiving the benefit. But I think they're in a different category. And I would, as I've asked before, I would like the Treasury to make a commitment at some time to treat this question separately and carve out inheritance from the purchase provisions relating to stamp duty, because I think that does need careful consideration. We want to encourage people to make wills, and we want to ensure that only those who are perhaps acting in ways we don't wish to encourage, that is the purchase of second homes, are the ones we are targeting, and not innocent islanders who may simply be inheriting under a will. Thank you, sir.
Much, Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I wasn't going to speak again until I heard the Deputy St One, just to add something to what he said, which is that a certain rate is payable on the value of a property when owned direct by a testator. If it's held through a share transfer arrangement, it passes as personal estate and does not attract the same level. And I just simply wish to support the Deputy in his submission that this whole aspect does need to be looked at with a view to equalising the inheritance provisions and the taxation burden on inheritance. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the 22nd Amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Senator Balwa.
Yes, thank you, sir. And just very briefly on the point of consultation, which I think is an extremely important point to make. Sometimes it's used as a reason to delay things, and sometimes it's within good intentions to do so, but is not necessarily reaching the people that actually need to be consulted. And so the scrutiny panel heard in a briefing recently about an issue with the consultation around enveloped property transaction tax. And I think as a constructive criticism to feed back, in actual fact, that maybe we want to look at streamlining and ensuring that our consultation process is fit for purpose and that we're hearing the voices of the people, whether they're pro or con against any recommendations or proposals that are being brought forward by the government, so that we have a fair representation when we're determining whether it's appropriate for our island. But so I thought it's appropriate to make those comments, and I think we would have less of the arguments about whether we should or shouldn't consult going forward. Thank you.
Very much, Senator. Deputy Bennell.
Thank you, sir. As I said in proposing the government's amendment to this amendment, the Council of Ministers has full sympathy with the desire for action to address Jersey's housing problems. The buy-to-let market remains fully in the sights of the proposed stamp duty review, during which fuller public engagement is envisaged. The stamp duty review is intended to address all of the key issues around the operation of stamp duty, including, for example, the existing differentials between the treatment of commercial properties and private dwellings. And the concerns of Deputy Renouf and Deputy Johnson have exemplified that as well. It could also look at other ways to encourage the supply of housing, for example, by discouraging people from holding on to empty properties. So I should point out that if this amendment is accepted by the Assembly as drafted, it will clearly prioritise a stamp duty increase for buy-to-let and other properties as an implementation, including law drafting project. This may delay work on the wider tax policy review, but it would perhaps largely remove the need for engagement with the public or with affected business stakeholders, especially the legal profession, on this particular issue, which would be difficult to conduct, as said by the Chief Minister in the amendment to the amendment, in an election year with the constraints of election purdah. I should flag that ministers cannot, at this stage, guarantee an implementation date. The necessary legislation could be complicated to draft, and robust provisions, including against tax avoidance, would need to be created to address situations where the use of a property quickly changed from that originally intended at the time of completing the sale. New obligations may need to be placed on the legal professionals who largely transact land and property transfers, and new powers given to those who need to assure compliance with the duty regime. If the amendment is accepted by the Assembly, I will ask officers to prepare draft legislation for consideration by the new government for its first government plan and its first finance law. In terms of rates of differential duty, I note that the UK has a 3 percentage point premium on buy-to-let and similar transactions at every duty band. So as a general rule, quite significant changes to our tax system should be given fuller consideration than is available to any of us at this time, be we ministers, backbench states members, government officers or islanders. This is a view I know that CSSP members share based on their previous reports, for example, on PY abolition and last year's government plan. This, to me, sir, feels rushed. The government would have been happy to support this amendment had the panel accepted the government amendment. Sir, in the circumstances, the government does not support this amendment as drafted, and I urge members to reject it. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon Senator Moore to respond.
Thank you, sir. And I would like to thank everybody who's contributed to this debate, and particularly for their votes in the amendment to the amendment. So this is certainly not a rush. As pointed out in my opening speech, considerable review of property taxation was conducted back in 2014. So the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel has consistently considered elements around stamp duty at the government plan debates because of the great importance that we place on the difficulties that islanders are reporting in terms of seeing property prices escalating and becoming increasingly unaffordable for many. We would have very much liked to have made the change to the stamp duty rate for buy-to-let properties in this government plan, as we have done last year, and we've attempted to in previous years make amendments to stamp duty rates. However, this amendment is a compromise following our discussions with government to allow time for the law of drafting that is required. And the Deputy of St. Juan raises a very interesting and important point about the impact that such a change may have on inheritance. However, I'm sure that most people would take into account the impact of stamp duty when they are doing their planning for the inevitable. So I do, however, agree with the Chief Minister that a review is unnecessary. As I stated earlier, considerable review has already been conducted. So our amendment is to bring forward some action in terms of providing a lever, using a lever that government has with regards to property taxation, and this is the quickest form of action that we could deliver in this particular area. But as the Constable of St. Juan stated, we cannot all resolve the property issues that we see in the island with one fell swoop. Sadly, I'm sure all members would absolutely love to do so if there was such a magic wand. So this is a small but considerable manoeuvre that could assist, hopefully, to achieve some easing in the property market for owner-occupiers, and particularly for first-time buyers, as we have seen in the United Kingdom, where they introduced a similar procedure for buy-to-let stamp duty. So, sir, I commend the amendment and ask for the appel.
What's called for, I ask the greffier to place a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote.
I can't take this, but we felt the numbers it was in the cover of it. 36, yeah.
36. Well, if members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting.
2.
The amendment has been adopted, 30 votes pour, 8 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 5 votes pour and 3 votes contre in the chat. Contre votes are requested.
Those members who voted contra in the link: Senator Farnham, Deputy Wickenden, Deputy of St Warren, Senator Lafondre, Constable of St Clements, Deputy Guida, Constable of Trinity, and Deputy Lewis, and also Deputy Ash, Deputy Pennell, Constable of St Mary.
Well, the next amendment for debate is the 24th amendment, lodged by the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
Page 2, paragraph A, after the words Article 9(2)(a) of the law, insert the words, except that the 2022 estimate for import duties total should be decreased by £231,000 by increasing the import duties for spirits, wine, cider and beer at 1% under RPI, with the relevant figures for 2022 in Appendix 2, Summary Table 1, updated in line with the following table, and subsequent figures updated accordingly. Import duty spirits, 2022 estimate in thousands of pounds, 7,364. Import duties wine, 9,211. Import duties cider, 842. Import duties beer, 6,289. Page 2, paragraph F, after the words of the report, insert the words, except that the head of expenditure for the general reserve shall be reduced by £231,000 to accommodate a drop in state's income caused by increasing the import duties for spirits, wine, cider and beer by 1% under RPI.
Senator Moore.
Sir, the rapporteur for this amendment will be the Deputy Iyer.
Very well. Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. The Government Plan 2022 to 25 proposes to freeze alcohol duty on all strengths of beer and cider, whilst increasing the duty on all wines and spirits by 5%. This amendment seeks to level this increase across all alcohol in order to keep the duty broad, simple and fair. Alcohol duty was frozen in 2021, but the Government Plan 2020 to 23 introduced above inflation increases to higher strength drinks, raising them by 14%, being RPI plus 10.9%. In a public hearing with the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, the Minister for Treasury and Resources indicated that the exclusion of beer and cider had to be compensated for, so hence the increase in wine and spirits. The Minister was not able to explain why it had been decided that beer and cider should continue to be frozen. When questioned on the potential impact on the hospitality sector, the Minister opined that the effect would be negligible. However, the Jersey Hospitality Association has, in a submission to the panel, expressed concern on the target about inflation increase in the excise duty, highlighting that it may encourage individuals to purchase cheaper duty-free spirits, reducing the amount of revenue the government may receive. The Council of Ministers have brought out a comments paper on this amendment. Please reference the reissue rather than the original, which stated that there would be a need to suspend the debate before final approval. This comment has been removed from the updated version. The Council of Ministers quote from the Jersey Opinion and Lifestyle Survey that there is evidence that too many adults are drinking at potentially hazardous levels. Perhaps it would be better to address the economic dilemma faced by many locals rather than increasing duty on spirits and wine excessively, which leads me to believe that the Council of Ministers wish to make the worst solution appear the better resolution. The comments paper goes on to say that alcohol duty was frozen last year in order to assist the hospitality industry. Well, perhaps the Council of Ministers could have considered freezing duty again this year to assist the hospitality industry and to enable it to recover from the situation it found itself in because of the COVID epidemic. It also states, and I quote, "Furthermore, duty rates for wine are now much lower than both Guernsey and the UK." But interestingly, it does not mention the duty rates for spirits, which according to the gov.uk website, since February 2019, have been at the rate of £28.74 duty at 100% alcohol by volume, which was the same figure that was implemented in March 2017 and remains as such today. The Jersey rate is already £16.98 per litre for 40% alcohol by volume, which equates to £42.45 at 100%. And it is intended by this government plan to increase it to £44.56. So it would be vastly more expensive in Jersey than it is in the United Kingdom, by £15.82 per litre. It is to be noted that the Government Plan 2020-23 states that it is estimated that the total duty collected on all alcohol will be approximately 23.7 million in 2020. If we look at Table 1 of the proposed Government Plan 2022-25, the total estimated income from alcohol duties in 2022 is for 23.9 million. And so it seems clear that the suggestion that increasing the rate of alcohol duty leads to a decrease in the amount of consumption is not proven. It was suggested by the Council of Ministers' comments that alcohol pricing is an important tool for discouraging the consumption of alcohol. This approach seems to have been unsuccessful. Will the government plan proposal decrease these levels? I think not. The problem of addiction should be addressed at a personal level, and those requiring support should receive it. Raising duty to such high levels will not decrease consumption, but may well affect inflation in the future, which is something we should all be working to avoid. The panel is conscious that an increase in alcohol duty will impact upon those selling and consuming. Yet it is also aware of the need to weigh up the balance of revenue raising, economic support, and public health measures. The panel, being sympathetic to the potential impact upon the hospitality sector of any increase in alcohol duty, has proposed a reduction in the planned 5% increase in duty on wine and spirits, and a halt to the freeze on duty on beer and cider to bring a level alcohol duty increase, which is 1% under the retail price index of 3.5%, introducing a rise of 2.5% across the board. The panel has been informed that this amendment, if adopted, would amount to a decrease of £231,000 revenue being raised. Although slight, this decrease will act as additional economic assistance to those sectors hit most by the pandemic, for example, hotels, restaurants and bars, which saw a 45% contraction of the gross value added in 2020. Statistical evidence of the impact of the pandemic on hospitality is clear. This negative outlook for the sector can be seen in the September 2021 Business Tendency Survey, for whom profitability and future business activity is pessimistic. The panel believes that amending the government plan to include a level increase in alcohol duty will aid in keeping taxes low, broad, simple and fair. It is sympathetic to the potential impact upon the hospitality sector of an increase in alcohol duty. The panel also believes that specifically targeting wine and spirit drinkers is fundamentally unfair. The panel therefore believes that an increase of 1% under RPI is a reasonable compromise between revenue raising, public health and economic support. Sir, I make the amendment.
Very much, Deputy. The amendment seconded.
Sir, I wonder if I may place on the record, for the sake of good order, that I do have a business involvement with a business operating in the hospitality sector. I don't believe it's a direct and pecuniary interest.
No, it isn't a direct pecuniary
So, but I
interest,
just wanted
you're
to
right
place that
to
on the
bring it to
record.
the attention of the. Very well. Does any member wish to speak on this amendment? Any member wishes to speak on the amendment? Conor St John.
Thank you, sir. As Deputy Iyer said in his opening, we've all received a letter from the Jersey Hospitality Association in support of the amendment. The association support a below inflation rise, and they're not across the board. They're not looking for a freeze. If I can quote a small piece from there, that, referring to the amendment, seemed to us like a sensible compromise that considered the government objectives of promoting health whilst raising revenue to pay for services. The Treasury Minister, sir, in her opening comments, spoke at length, I thought, about the hospitality industry and the help that they've been given, the support during COVID, as well as a welcome roadmap for tourism recovery. Well, here is a clear signpost, sir, on that roadmap being given by the industry. We recently heard from the Chief Minister in the previous debate when he spoke about a desire to be coherent and consistent. And again, I'd encourage him and other ministers to support the amendment and show coherence and consistency when it comes to MPO duty. I'll be supporting the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. And I think I've already said it, and I think I'll be saying it many more times. I echo the words of the Constable of St John. I just wanted to add in on this because I too had read the submission from the hospitality industry and read through the corporate services amendment and listened intently to the rapporteur's speech. Because it is curious this of when we get to this section of the budget, as we used to call it in the old days, of the duty, impo taxes, etc. This is slightly different, obviously, but it did raise a few eyebrows with me because of its stark different approach to what the UK Chancellor did very recently. So I am, and I see that the Minister will be speaking very shortly, so I'll be listening again to her speech because the rise in wine, etc., interests me. Is that based on it's a higher consumption on this island as opposed why it wasn't the reverse on beer and cider? That to me is the only conclusion I've been able to come to. But that's why, and I'm glad that the Minister will be speaking because I think the argument is there. And I'm not a big drinker, and I do have friends who enjoy their drink, and I am not a judgmental person in that regard as well. I've always been more concerned about the easiness of addiction and the support that must be put in place. This is slightly different. This is supporting business, and I think listening to those who have gone through and are going through a very difficult Christmas again, I think I can't see how I cannot support this amendment, but I will listen with interest to the Minister. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And similarly, I'm going to look forward to hearing from the Minister because I never quite understood the original proposition and genuinely can't see why cider and beer were being excluded, except, and as I've said before, I hope unintentional consequence of that is that beer and cider, which, and I hate the fact that I have to kind of pull back onto stereotypes in order to make my point against stereotypes, but is that beer and cider tend to be consumed more by men. Wine, certainly when out and about in pubs, tends to be, I believe, consumed more by women. And so it seemed to me to be penalising women and in favour of men, which is something I've not been able to shake. My experience of going to the pubs are that tends to be men who buy beer, tends to be women who buy wine. I'm sorry, and I apologise profusely for using a stereotype there, but it's the only way I can say it. And so there is an underlying sexism in the original proposition, which I just cannot stand by. And it often happens that unintentionally women are discriminated against through government policy, and that's not this government. I'm talking about governments all around the world, everywhere. And this is one small example of it. So, sir, I'm at the moment I'm very minded to support the amendment because it seems fairer, quite simply. Whilst I don't like the small shortfall in income that it's likely to bring, it is fairer, and that for me is more important. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Pinner.
Thank you, sir. Council of Ministers does not support the CSSP's amendment, which reduces AMPO income by around £230,000. The council remains concerned at levels of alcohol consumption in Jersey and the prevalence of consumption of wine and spirits among younger consumers and even school children. Emerging survey information suggests that the recent lockdowns, if anything, may have increased consumption across all population groups that drink alcohol. That said, we are, of course, mindful of the position of our hospitality sector. In addition to all of the other financial support which has been provided during the pandemic, last year the government froze all alcohol duties, and this year proposes still to freeze the duty on beer and cider category of alcoholic drinks. Beer and cider are relatively lower strength by volume and perhaps less susceptible to abuse. Additionally, since 1995, the duty on wine and spirits has not increased in line with beer and cider, which has seen increases of almost twofold comparatively. Regarding wine in Jersey, duty rates are still much lower than both Guernsey and the UK. However, in Jersey, wine is the type of alcohol most often consumed in a hazardous and harmful way by a much larger number of people. Regarding spirits, our health officers have flagged concerns that this is the type of alcohol consumed most by younger people. Given the increased harm of alcohol to the developing adolescent brain and risks of dependence into adulthood, there are significant public health gains in ensuring that AMPO duty reflects harm and reduces consumption among this vulnerable group. So the AMPO remain an important source of government revenue, and being specific duties levied on liquid volumes, it is important to maintain their real value, both to maintain government revenues and to maintain the impact that duty inclusive pricing has in effective consumption levels. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment?
I was just wondering some appropriate time to propose the adjournment, sir.
Well, what I propose to do is ask if anyone wishes to speak. I think you can propose the adjournment, but it is slightly early, Chief Minister. So. Deputy Pamplin is seeking a point of clarification from you, Deputy Pinnell. Minister, Deputy Pamplin seeks a point of clarification. Do you give way for a point of clarification? Sorry, was that yes or no? Yes. Very well. Deputy Pamplin, what's your point of clarification?
Thank you. It was around the consumption levels. Did I hear her correctly that the consumption levels of spirit are high in young people and people of this island? That was the clarification. Thank you.
Minister?
So was the deputy questioning whether the consumption of spirit levels in young people were high?
That's what I understood the question to be.
That's what I understood. And yes, sir, health advisors have said that is the case.
Thank you very much. The adjournment is proposed. Very well. I have a number of members wishing to speak, so I propose that we adjourn now and resume at 2:15.